Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting. The content of today's agenda for today's meeting has been agreed by the Chief Executive in consultation with myself and the group leaders. Council Procedure Rule 5.5 relating to the commencement of the key discussion items by 7 p.m. shall not be applied. Please can I remind members to only speak when I have invited them to do so and to use the chat function and not to raise hands to indicate if they do wish to speak. Please do not use your chat for any other purpose other than requesting to speak, and please do not register to speak on agenda items in advance of that item commencing. The voting for agenda item 5 will be done by exception. Any members wishing to express dissension from the recommendations should indicate in the chat bar. Voting for agenda items 6, 7, and 8 will be done by the roll call process. There will be a 15-minute break in the meeting at approximately 7:15 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to advise Council that the Council has been awarded the Workplace Wellbeing Charter, a national award for England. The Charter recognises the Council as a place to work that is committed to the health and well-being of all its staff. We are pleased to have achieved excellence standard in the health and safety, which is more important than ever during the current COVID-19 pandemic. Members are reminded of the provisions of Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992 in relation to agenda item 6. This means that if you are present today and an amount of council tax is payable by you and has remained unpaid for at least 2 months, you should at the meeting and as soon as practicable after its commencement disclose the fact that Section 106 applies to you and shall not vote on any question concerning agenda item 6. If it applies to you, you may speak on the item, but you must not vote.
Thank you for that. Can we move to item 2? Can I ask group business managers to advise if there are any apologies? Councillor Smith, Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Charlotte Goodley. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Ask them all in order.
Councillor Terry Lyons. Councillor Terry Lyons.
No, here. Can
I am here. Sorry, I forgot. I put the hand in instead. Yes, Councillor Greaves will be an hour late.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Monroe.
Hello. Yes, Councillor Eastwood is delayed, unfortunately, but he will be attending. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I want to give up.
Yes, Councillor Mohan Sokol.
Thank you. Apology from Mr. Mayor, Councillor Nausheen Dad, Councillor Fazila Lunat, and Councillor Musarat Parvez. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we move to item 3? I move that the minutes of the meeting held on 9 September 2020 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded?
Second.
Thank you. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's carried. Thank you. Item 4. Does any member wish to declare an interest in any of the agenda items? Please indicate in the box if you do have any interest to declare. Please can I remind members to complete and submit the declaration of interest form after the meeting. Item 5, Councillor Sokol.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the schedule of council meeting for the remainder of the 20 and 21 municipal year be approved. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second that. Thank you.
The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments on that? Councillor Alison Monroe.
Apologies, I hadn't realised I'd still got my hand up.
Okay. So there's no comments. Right of reply, councillors Mohan, Sokol.
Yeah, if there is no question, can I ask a member to approve it? Thank you.
We will now move to the vote. Are all members in favour of the recommendation? If any members wish to dissent, please indicate the dissension in the chat box. Yeah, that's carried. Thank you. Item 6, Council is asked to consider the update of the medium-term financial plan. Councillor Turner.
Good evening and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice to see everybody. Mr. Mayor, this is the updated budget strategy. As we all well know, we are living in strange times with a very unpredictable future, but we have to carry on as a council delivering great services and responding to the pandemic to keep our residents safe and to protect the NHS. In preparing this report, we have used the best information available and most up-to-date intelligence there is. And can I thank officers for the time and effort it has taken to prepare this report. However, as I have said on many occasions, trying to predict the future currently is not easy. But in part, that's what this report tries to do. We have to develop a budget for next year, and this is the first official step in that process. And I describe this update as steady as she goes, and that is the approach that Iron officers intend to propose in next year's budget. We are in a strong financial position due to the careful management of our finances over the last few years. And we will get through this year and will be in a strong position to go forward next year, subject to getting at least the financial settlement we expect from government and hopefully a little bit more extra support this year as the impact of COVID on local authorities starts to increase. We all know that local authorities have been in the front line in the fight against this pandemic and have been supported by extra finances from central government. However, that support will need to be continued as and when the full impacts of the virus feed through to the council spending and income. And I trust the government will be true to its word on levelling up the north and funding whatever it takes. Mr. Mayor, times are tough and they will get tougher, but I know we have the expertise and the right officers, and this, along with the hope for fair funding settlements, means we will deliver a budget next year that works for all our residents, protects their health and well-being, and starts to tackle the inequalities in Kirklees that have been exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We will continue to be ambitious and we will do all we can to protect jobs and our local economy and to keep residents safe and well. Mr. Mayor, can I ask Council that the recommendations agreed at the meeting of Cabinet on the 20th of October and are set out at para 6, page 16 be approved?
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that and reserve the right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments on this?
David Hall first.
Councillor David Hall. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council budget strategy. Well, largely it is what it is, isn't it? It's the administration amending its spending plans for the next few years. And the real debate on the contents of the budget, of course, will come in February when we're at the budget meeting. So as such, I have just a couple of comments and a couple of questions, actually, which I hope the administration will be able to answer. The first is on minimum revenue provision. Now, this was going to support the medium to long term and specifically the new waste contract, which needs to come into place. I I understand now, looking at the figures, that this is to be used in the next couple of years. When is this money going to run out? How much time have we got left? And can someone tell us how much has actually been put by to meet some of the challenges that we've got to face in the future? The second is just a comment about the housing supply numbers. It looks to me as though the housing supply numbers have been drastically downscaled. And that does lend weight to our arguments that the numbers were never achievable in the first place. Again, on page 51, there's reference there to joint committees and the levies that the joint committees place on the borough. And that is to rise year on year. And I think we must resist attempts by the joint committees to try and raise their levies to such a level. And I would look to the leader, please, to bat for Kirklees on this point, because we're not in a position where we can be giving more money to these joint committees at the moment, and they're not feeling the same pressures that we are. A word on the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account. Now that the administration has decided to bring the management of its stock in-house, what will be the financial figures going forward for the HRA? I am presuming that the move will see efficiencies, which will translate into savings, but what are these going to be? I hope the administration knows or has done some projections on this. Or else, of course, it's made a decision without a regard to all the facts. So I would like some reassurance on that, please. And then we have the capital plan. Now, I've noticed there's an extra column in the capital plan now. The capital is called later years. We have 4 years, and then we have a column entitled later years. So first, we used to have a capital plan over 5 years. It then went over 7 years. It then went back to 5 years, and now it's over infinity and beyond, it seems to me. Is this a way of the administration making commitments to capital projects that it never actually has to meet? Because unless you put an end date on some of these things, we could be waiting them forever. So could I have an answer to that, please? Now, I think the recommendations in the report, quite a few of them are technical, which of course we would support. But in power, we would adopt a different capital plan, so we would not support this part of the paper. So we've decided to abstain and let the administration vote through its own budget plan. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that the government has said that the spending review for local government will be for 1 year only. And this, along with the fact that the amount of funding available will not be announced until November, makes it much more difficult for councils to plan ahead. I also note that the report states that the government has allocated 3.7 billion so far, and there remains a projected gap of 698 million across metropolitan and unitary authorities, with a further gap of 656 million from council tax and business rate shortfalls. However, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the overall local funding gap is likely to be in the region of more than £3 billion if monthly pressures average just 2/3 of those faced between April and July, and if no further funding is forthcoming. In March, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, announced that the government would do whatever it takes to get the economy through the crisis. Faced with the ongoing uncertainty, the prospect of Kirklees going into Tier 3 measures, and the looming crisis of redundancies when the furlough scheme ends next week, the Liberal Democrats of the North have written to the Prime Minister asking for urgent action to deal with the urgent funding needs for local track and trace, supporting people who need to self-isolate, protecting people who live in care, and supporting children and young people, and also with a request to extend the furlough scheme to save jobs and support people in our communities. What is the council leader doing to seek reassurance from the government that the promise to meet the spending gap will be honoured and that additional funds will be secured if Kirklees, as is expected, is put into Tier 3 measures? And just finally, I believe that one of the most effective ways of getting help to the most vulnerable people in our communities is by working with ward councillors. By supporting local groups and individuals with targeted small grants, we've been able to make a real difference in our communities, and in particular to people who would otherwise have fell through the gaps, as it were. Will the council commit to providing additional grants at ward level if we do move into tier 3 measures? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things we don't know at the moment is whether come 21-22 that we will be in tier 2, tier 3, or who knows what tiers may come beyond that. But we do know that if we are in tier 3, that we get, as I understand it, about £8 per head of population as part of funding that we receive. And if we're in tier 2, we get £2 per head of population. So I've got a few questions really that I'd be interested to know what the leader thinks of. Is this money additional to the money that's been promised by central government to cover the costs of COVID, or is it part of it? So I'd be really interested to know that. Is it a one-off sum, or does it is it there for a specific period of time? And so I'd be interested in that. How long is this money supposed to cover us for? And how does the split in funding between tiers 2 and tier 3 work within the budget? And I'd also be interested in how the split is between the council's own functions and activities and that money it's giving to businesses and the community from this government support of £2 or £8 a head. So though we don't know whether that's going to be in the 21-22 budget, I'd be interested to know the views of the leader if it was.
Councillor John Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to the team that have pulled together this budget under very trying circumstances, really. Although it should, of course, be called the COVID budget strategy. Everyone's aware of the national context and the nature of the current challenges. They're laid out at the bottom of page 23 of the report and over the page, and they're scattered through the report. A couple more figures to include from a recent BBC article include government borrowing was £36.1 billion in September alone, 173 billion to the year to the date so far this year, and the national debt now stands at 103% of the UK's GDP. The ONS have described the impact of public sector borrowing as unprecedented in peacetime. How that money has been spent should be the subject of an inquiry. Mistakes are always made in times of emergency, but we need to know that what those mistakes were so that we can improve decisions. But we also need to demonstrate that untendered contracts are unacceptable. Public confidence demands the knowledge that we're on a level playing field. At the beginning of the pandemic, governments told councils to spend what they needed to combat the effects of the pandemic, and we took that advice in good faith. That was the public contract between government and local authorities. After the scenes in Manchester over the last couple of days, the extraordinary horse trading over emergency funding, we do well to look again at what we might assume is reasonable to expect from government. The sheer spite displayed in the government's final fair settlement should have sent a shiver through every CEO, regional mayor and council leader in the north. This is just one example of what I mean. On page 27, 1.3.17, we have an annual tax income loss of 10.2 million between council tax and business rates due to the COVID impact on both businesses and households. This, tied with current government reluctance to clarify what constitutes COVID spending, could land our residents in a very bleak place, with us not being able to spend on the things that we know that we'll need to make our communities resilient. Adult social care, children's services, and the growing issue of mental health and well-being are all seemingly outside COVID spending. Just in that one example, we can see that the COVID virus is something that is happening to us, but COVID spending is something that's being done to us. Finally, I'd add that that normally we'd see a strategy as a number of scenarios with caveats and qualifications sprinkled amongst them. Pre-COVID budgets saw Brexit becoming the big concern, and it hasn't gone away, not by a long chalk. Economic growth had flatlined at the end of 2019. Now we basically have two big caveats strung together with our service needs. It will take sustained direct government backing well into the next year and possibly beyond for us to get COVID under control and make sure that our most vulnerable residents aren't left behind. On a last note, I'd say, could government please hand over the free school meals in holiday time? For goodness sakes, sports folk shaming government shouldn't be a thing. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies. I'm going to keep my comments to this short, because I have spoken when we've taken this through cabinet and we've taken this through scrutiny committees. I think I would echo the comments people have made about the work that's been put into this, and I echo the comments that Graham made at the beginning. I think last time we talked about this, I described it as trying to nail jelly to a wall in terms of trying to predict where the impact of all this would be. And the officers deserve our credit for attempting to produce something that gives us at least a starting point to understand. I do worry about the capital plan, and I do worry about how realistic that capital plan remains, given that we already have seen the impact of businesses having to close or delay or reduce their activities, and particularly in the construction industry. And if, as winter comes on, if things do change here locally, we'll see that again. David's stolen my point about the later years figure appearing, and when you look at some of the lines in the capital plan, they do seem to be heavily weighted towards those later years, which is an indication perhaps of a recognition that perhaps the capital plan as set out is ambitious in the current timescale that we normally look at the capital plan. And I think for brevity, I'm going to leave it at that today. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Andrew Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think colleagues have covered a lot of the points I wanted to make, but I just wanted to start off with a concern about the gaps that we've got and the way it's been dealt with. Again, there seems to be a tendency on the part of government to announce some figures locally and some figures globally. We see the example in Greater Manchester, where we know they're going to, there's a suggestion they're going to be receiving an extra £60 million for the whole area, but then that's set alongside the £1 billion extra we've been told that's going to be an offer. And I think central government really needs to be clear about the amount of money that's going to come and help the individual areas, whether that's in tier 2 or tier 3. I've got a specific concern as well about some of the promises we were made. Page 23, we're told that council's going to be subsidised, covered for up to 75% of in-year irrevocable service loss. I think when we started out in March, we were told just get done what needs to be done. You need to make sure that economies are protected, and particularly local people are supported as well as possible. So I really want us to, in conversation with government, to make sure that we're being supported in the way we can do. I've got a more specific question about rising unemployment, and we've had debates in the council chamber before about in-work benefits, particularly the council tax reduction scheme. And I just would like to know, we've got an indication that unemployment, is around 4.1%, up from 3.9 in March. It's likely to increase as furlough schemes are reduced or removed. So what's the impact of rising unemployment on Kirklees' revenue stream? I think we need to be prepared for that. And if that's significant, again, there needs to be support for that, which is part of the global picture. The last one, I think Councillor Lawson touched on this as well, is about the impact of Brexit, and in particular leaving the European Union without a deal. We know we're supposed to be leaving at deal or no deal at the end of December. And we also know that during the current crisis, there's been a lot of engagement with our local employers, local businesses about support, particularly around business rates. But my concern is we know that the global figure for export to the European Union was 50%. 50% of goods are exported. What's the picture in Kirklees? How many of our companies are exporting to Europe, and what would be the impact of having to trade on World Trade Organization terms for the goods that they produce, particularly in manufacturing goods? And not just the cost of tariffs, but the cost of employing export agents, of additional transport costs because lorries are parked in other parts of the United Kingdom, loss of export markets as well, because that's a compounding factor. So it is mentioned in the report. I think some of the engagement we've had with businesses, a survey to say, where are you, if you're exporting, where are you exporting to, and what what's the picture about the additional impact on your business? And again, if Kirklees has got hold of that information in our discussion with central government, we can ask for support in that area as well, because at the moment we know that COVID is going to continue well beyond that, and it's going to have two contributory factors after that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Shabir Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a few references that was made to me to respond. I was going to respond, but I think it's really good that a few issues have been actually highlighted that I need to respond. Firstly, I don't want to pretend to be the Section 151 officer because we've got a fantastic Section 151 officer, Eamon Croston, and in terms of the MRP, minimum revenue provision, and all the various sensitivities. If any member wants a technical briefing, I'm sure Graham can arrange that. I think I'll focus on what we are here to do, is to actually look at how the pandemic and how the finances are shaping up. Firstly, let me be clear that we aren't on a cliff edge like many of the local authorities are. However, that doesn't mean to say that there aren't challenges ahead. But because we have got an excellent Section 151 officer and his team, we are okay for the time being. Having said that, a number of members highlighted the fact that very early in the pandemic, when we were having our meetings with Robert Jenrick, I think he was genuine in what he was saying in terms of do not worry, spend what you need to spend, and we will make sure we see you through. However, things move on, and those of you who have been around a long time, irrespective of which government is in power, Treasury has the last say. And I think there's a battle going on between the Treasury and the MHCLG in terms of how much can we get funded and how much shouldn't we get funded. To get things into context, there's £4 billion nationally that we should be owed back in terms of what we have spent up to date. God help us in the next few months, because if things are going to go as I fear they may do, then we're going to actually be in for a very rough ride. But at the same time, in terms of our local finances, I am reasonably confident, because the advice I'm getting from our Section 151 officer is to say that nothing to worry about at the moment, but just keep an eye on the longer term. In terms of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, for our listeners who may be listening and who may be wondering what it means, it basically refers to the restrictions that may or may not be in place at the moment. At the moment, we are in Tier 2. Members and the audience will realise that Manchester has recently gone into Tier 3 after Liverpool, and the North East went into Tier 3 very recently. And their situation is very, very different. But let me tell you what our situation at the moment locally. Government has said our figures are stabilising, and they are keeping us in Tier 2 for the time being. And I'll tell you why we need to keep in Tier 2. I'm not really too concerned about what the other neighbouring authorities are, be in Greater Manchester or West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire or South Yorkshire. But our position is very, very clear. We've been in restrictions since 31st of July, and people don't seem to understand that. And we have been managing day in, day out, and we've got some excellent staff and volunteers who have actually been on top of the pandemic. We understand that there are challenges, and we understand that the job is difficult. But having said that, we know what our figures are telling us. One thing our figures aren't telling us is this is an issue regarding the hospitality industry, or cafes or restaurants or pubs or clubs, or to do with the economy. Again, members will know, very early day when we had the outbreak in Cobra and then a bed factory, our officers went in there. Because it was a firm, we knew exactly who we had to contact, test and isolate and get on top of it, and very, very quickly the firms went back into operation. The danger is when the pandemic and when the infection is taking place in a community, at community level, that's where it's more difficult. So the transmissions that are taking place are in the community.
30 seconds.
I'm nearly finished, Mr. Mayor. So the point I'm making, Mr. Mayor, is in terms of Tier 3, I wouldn't worry too much about that at the moment. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that we stay in tier 2. In terms of the other issues what we raised regarding are we batting for Kirklees? We're not just batting for Kirklees, we're batting for local government, and we've got a very good leader at the LGA.
Thank you, Councillor Pondo.
He's
Time's
making
over.
sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that the subject was council budget strategy, so I think we went off topic slightly, so bringing it back on the topic. I think the council budget strategy, even though comprehensive, going through such a time that we're going through at the moment, and what we will be going through, not just for the next 6-12 months, but beyond that, is that the budget is slightly singular as far as the numbers are concerned. There's no contingency as far as the numbers are concerned. So if worst case scenario is that our revenue as a council drops by 6, 7, 8%, what do we do as far as the incomes, as far as the budget strategy is concerned? What changes? What improves? What hatches do we batten down? So that there's none of that there. It's just it's almost as if that we go hold some money in reserve, but what? But so there is no real strategy. All there is some numbers in there, as if things will carry on almost as normal without any forethought to, well, the drops or the increases, what are we going to do about it? We need to be prepared. We don't need any surprises in 3 or 6 months' time. We need to have it written down now what we will do if certain occurrences happen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Right of reply, Councillor Turner.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, there's quite a lot of points there, wasn't there? I'll try and cover as many as I can in the time I have. What I think it was Councillor Smith talked about the spending review. Yes, it is going to be late this year. It's going to be November, but we have had them later than that. There was a famous incident a few years ago where we literally got it on the 23rd, 24th of December. We're aware of that. We always worked to the assumption it was going to be late, so that's why we're ready for it, and we will be able to deal with that. There's also a suggestion about funding. We have received tranches of money from government, which is absolutely to be welcomed, and that's great. And there was another £1 billion announced last week, I believe, from memory. That has not yet been allocated, and we don't know what the formula for that is. I checked this afternoon because I thought this may come up, and we don't know what that is as yet. So there is some more money coming through. And a lot of the comments were really there's no answer, because a lot of this is as Councillor Taylor put it quite succinctly, it is trying to nail jelly to the wall. I mean, there's some comments about unemployment. I hand on heart, I have no idea. What I do hope is that unemployment is kept to an absolute minimum, and that as far as possible, we, along with government and the other trade bodies, support local businesses, and we protect jobs and the local economy to the absolute maximum we can, along with government working with us to do that. So I have no idea what the numbers will be. As low as possible is my absolute hope. Brexit, we have a Brexit officer group constantly looking at Brexit. The leader is part of a wider national group looking at Brexit. And again, those impacts are really difficult to pin down at the moment. We have all the information, or as much information we can gather. Some of that information is West Yorkshire wide, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to tease out the figures for ourselves. But we do have a wealth of information with some excellent officers who are constantly looking at this, and as Councillor Taylor will know, report to scrutiny every time there's a scrutiny meeting, and we discuss this at great length. I don't think we always reach a consensus, but we actually discuss it in great detail. So yeah. The MRP, the flexibility profile is actually recommended to last till 23-24. And Councillor Hall mentioned the waste strategy. There was some money already in reserve for the waste strategy. So that, along with that, will help offset that, and that will continue to go forward. And there's some spending assumptions in the report are providing a framework to review alongsst emerging budget protocols and through the remainder of the council budget round. There's a long way to go before we get to February. Leader members will be involved in that process, don't forget. There's a long way to go, and things will hopefully change for the better. I'm not that optimistic they will, but things will change between now and February, and they may even be changing as we speak in council chamber. We live in very, very uncertain times. No Section 151 officer and no portfolio has ever had to sit down and second guess so many things ever in the history of local government. This is really challenging, and me and Eamon spend an awful lot of time looking at all the scenarios, trying to second guess. And we come up with the worst cases, best case, sort of medium, and some of those graphs are in that report. So we are spending a lot of time trying to do that. But as I say, it is an emerging process, and it will continue to change as we move towards February. Thank you. I think I've picked everything up there. Oh, capital plan. Yes, David mentioned and John mentioned the capital plan. We're reviewing the capital plan at the moment. Yes, it is ambitious. Can we achieve it? I hope so. But as you rightly pointed out, we live in uncertain times where there's capacity within the market. Some of the figures are vague going forward is because we don't forget we have a 10-year project around Huddersfield and Dewsbury Blueprint, and some of those projects will come into that later on. But we are in the process of reviewing the capital plan, and by the time it comes to budget, we'll flesh that out a lot more. We'll have a lot better idea how we go further forward. Again, some of that is predicated on how the local economy is performing, how many businesses we sadly will lose, let's be honest, and that's a real shame, but we will lose businesses. So some of that is predicated again on some of those longer term issues about what happens with funding, how it impacts the local economy, etc. So it is challenging, but I can assure you that we will produce an ambitious and the best budget we can in February 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. We now move to the vote.
Councillor Pandor.
For.
Councillor David Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor Lawson.
Abstain.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Greaves. I'll come back. He may not be here. I think he said he was delayed. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Ahmed. No, I'll come back. Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Armour. Come back to that. Abstain, I think that was. Councillor Asif.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
Abstain.
Councillor Bolt.
Abstain.
Councillor Burke.
Abstain.
Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Paula Davies.
Abstain.
Councillor Paul Davis.
For.
Councillor Eastwood.
Just don't know yet. That's why we're going to be working incredibly hard with the Directors of Public Health, with our local councils, and with
Councillor Eastwood.
everything that we possibly can to reduce the.
I'll move on. Councillor Donald Firth. No, I'll move on.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Firth, thank you. Councillor Eric Firth.
For.
Councillor Granger Mead.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Hall.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
Abstain.
Councillor Hill. I'll come back to that. Councillor Homewood.
For.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain.
For.
Councillor Iredale. Councillor Iredale. We'll come back to that. Councillor Kowshik.
4.
Councillor Kendrick.
4.
Councillor Khan.
4.
Councillor Lees Hamilton.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Richards.
4.
Councillor Lowe.
4.
Councillor Lukic.
Against.
Councillor Lyons.
For.
Councillor Marchington.
Abstain.
Councillor Mather.
4.
Councillor McBride. Councillor McGuinn.
Abstain.
Councillor Munro.
Abstain.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
For.
Councillor O'Donovan.
4.
Councillor Patrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Pattison.
4.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Pinnock.
Abstain.
Councillor Sarwar.
4.
Councillor Scott.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Smage.
Abstain.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Sokol.
4.
Councillor John Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Turner.
4.
Councillor Ulla.
4.
Councillor Uppal.
4.
Councillor Walker.
4.
Councillor Warner.
4.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor White.
4.
Councillor Zaman.
4.
Okay, I'll just go back to a few members who didn't register a vote. If you can just bear with me. Can just try Councillor Akhtar.
4.
Councillor Armour.
Yes, abstain it was.
Was that abstain? Councillor Asif. No. Councillor Holmes.
I've already voted, if you
Oh,
mean
sorry.
me.
Apologies. Councillor Hill.
Can you ask Councillor Ahmed? I think he was off air or something.
All right, Councillor Ahmed, are you back on air to vote?
Yeah, I'm back on air. 4.
4.
Thank you.
And just check. And the last one to just check is Councillor Iredale.
Abstain.
Abstain.
It looks like Charles Greaves has joined the meeting as well.
Okay, Councillor Greaves, can I just register a vote on this budget strategy?
I won't be making a vote. I've only just entered the meeting, so I haven't heard any of the discussions that's taken place.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, that recommendation's carried.
Thank you. We move to item 7. Council is asked to consider our council plan. As part of this item, a video will be played. Councillor Shubir Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, Mr. Mayor, I just want to do a quick reflection in terms of the 3 things which leaders up and down the country have seen in terms of how services have transformed. The stuff that we've been trying to do for many, many years, and the way we see people and staff and our community transform, it's never been seen before. The other thing that has actually been quite a shift in change is the way IT and digitalization has actually changed, purely this meeting and various other IT advancements have been done. And certainly the way the voluntary and community sector and the faith sector has actually, come out in a way that I could have never imagined. When the private sector was focused, were on the voluntary community sector mobilised itself and came forward. And that's where really what I want to start talking about, the recovery in Kirklees that will affect more lives, because the pandemic in itself, like I said earlier on, hasn't really gone away, and there's still a long way to go in terms of to get out of the woods. also the long-term effects on physical and mental health and jobs and education and infrastructure is probably going to get a lot worse as we move forward, and I'll touch on that later on. Years of damage have already been done, but the way the pandemic has actually made that worse in the last few months, right, yeah, has been devastating. Lives have been lost, livelihoods have been lost, and people's life chances are further at greater threat. But one thing that we as a council are committed to, and I've seen all the councillors actually do the best they can, and I really, really applaud that. At the same time, government is doing its best, because whatever the people might say, you know, whichever government was in power, it would be a difficult job to do. So we need to acknowledge that as well. The way staff and our partners have actually come out and done things that I would have never imagined needs applauding, and most of all, the way residents have actually gone about doing their normal day-to-day business, if that's how you want to phrase it, again, have been remarkable. You know, you always get a few people who don't comply, but the majority of the people have actually been complying. And this is where planning for recovery has to start now on a fresh footing, with some fresh foundations. That's why the council plan this year, it's not just a process that we need to actually get through. It's so important, right, yeah, that we get it right as best we can. And it's the future that we define, and the recovery that we define will pave the way for a new generation that will be actually paying for the costs of what we see happening today in terms of, you know, extra borrowing. We've got a vision, but for people to engage in that vision, we need to carry them with us, and we need to actually make sure that they're actually part and parcel of making sure that that vision materializes in terms of the next few years and what we do. And there are challenges. The challenges are daunting, but people who know myself and the chief exec, you know, we rise to all the challenges, and we like to look at opportunities. And that's what I want members to do today, to actually look at the challenges and look at the opportunities that we can actually celebrate and move forward. And we need a shared common purpose and a shared response in terms of rising up to the scale of the task. We might be from different political parties, but I'm sure we all want to do the best we can for our local communities. You know, councillors are committed, and individuals across the Kirklees are committed, and I've seen that firsthand. They've operated in such a way that they've been selfless and completely focused in terms of how they can do something better for our communities. And it's not just the councillors, it's also our staff and our partners. They've shown remarkable resilience, creativity and professionalism. And you know, don't take my word for it, because, you know, just in case you don't believe me, what might be an idea is we'll play the video that the mayor referred to earlier on. And when you see this video, when I first saw it, I nearly cried. It's a very simple video, but it actually brings home truth in terms of what great work our staff are doing. So, Richard, over to you. Can we have the video, please? It's only a short video.
Alison and I work for Kirklees Active Leisure as a swimming instructor. Following lockdown in April, we were seconded to Kirklees Council, and on the 4th of May we met Sabina and Zaheen, or Zeni as we call her.
Hello, my name is Sabina. I'm Zaheen's mum. There's so much I'd like to say about Alison and Ashley and all the help they provided me with. But if I can sum it up in a few words, I'd say they've changed my life.
You, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Alison. Happy birthday to you.
Our first day's working and today we're in Batley. I'm Shirley Sheikh and I'm part of the cohesion team.
I have support from the mental health team.
I feel like there's a community spirit as well on the street, which is nice.
The Kirklees Council approached us and we went through all the risk assessments.
My community is like too much when we are all together and talking.
Brought faith communities together.
Thank you. I hope you found that video inspiring as much as I did. Like I say, it is a very powerful video, and thank you to our great staff and our partners who have put that video together. There could have been 1,000 more examples that we could have actually portrayed, because there's been so much remarkable work that's been done, not just by our staff, but also the folk that are working hard in our neighbourhoods. They've supported vulnerable people, they've knocked on people's doors who have been isolating and looked after them. You know, in a time of crisis, you know, I've seen firsthand the way our communities, our councillors and all our partners have come out together, and I'm really, really proud that they've done that. 130 mutual aid groups sprang up in the last few months, and literally thousands of volunteers have actually been marching up and down the streets, you know, in trying to help people who actually were devastated with the pandemic, and still continue to do that. They've supported each other, and they've also made sure that our communities follow public health rules to make sure that people are safe. The recovery is going to be hard, but like I said, there's going to be opportunities to start on new, fresh, firm foundations, and embedding what our residents want. What our residents want, and I'm sure you all know this, they want fairness and they want to do the right thing. You know, they want everybody in this council chamber to actually, you know, make sure that, you know, they step up and do the right thing. And the challenge is one of fairness that runs through everything we do. And one thing that the pandemic has actually exposed and magnified is the deep inequalities and the unfairness in our society. Financial insecurity, health inequalities, disability, age, housing, and ethnicity have all been highlighted in such a way that, you know, we do need to do something in terms of addressing and levelling up at a local level. The pandemic has actually magnified a lot of the issues. None of us want to exclude anybody, and that's why the council plan has to actually carry as many people with it as it can. The 8 outcomes are still there, and I don't want to read them off. I'm sure you can read them yourself. But what we've changed this year is to actually put an element of accountability and outcomes, because there's no point in actually getting the 8 outcomes when there's no accountability, and that's what I'm really, really keen to do. And I want you to hold me to account, because you know that's what I want to do. You know, and I won't get it right all the time, but by you holding me to account, we can only get better. I don't have all the answers. Hence, in the later part of the agenda, what I'm planning to do is get a cross-party inequalities commission up and running, because I want to make sure that, irrespective of which party is in power, the key element of the council plan, the inequality bit, is actually enshrined in everything we do in future years to come. So I hope you accept the invitation. And elected member will be critical in terms of driving the whole thing forward. But at the same time, we need to bear in mind the voices of our communities, real live experiences, and we also need to actually address the issues which we all know have existed throughout. We can't afford to keep in our own bubbles. When I talk about bubbles, I'm not talking about the pandemic and the isolation bubbles. We all live in our own little lives. We all meet people who are very similar to us. But until we actually start to get into the communities where they are seeing firsthand the inequalities that they're facing, and then until we actually start to understand what people are facing in the fringes of our society, this council will be poorer, and we need to actually go out and seek out new knowledge and seek out the barriers so we can actually then start to eradicate the barriers. The agenda is very ambitious, and I am up for the challenge. But at the same time, what I want you guys to be is also be as ambitious as myself in terms of achieving our objectives.
Shabir's time nearly up, so I've got long to go. Yeah.
I've nearly finished, Mr. Mayor, but I think it's really important, right? Yeah. Or what I can do is
carry on. It's all right. Carry on.
Yeah. Challenges, Mr. Mayor, are massive. A few years ago we were talking about austerity. We've turned that bridge. I'm still upbeat regarding our investment plan. And we will keep on investing in our investment plan. And for the last couple of months, we have been working really, really hard to actually show the blueprint for Dewsbury and the master plan for Huddersfield. And hopefully we'll see some of the big capital schemes come forward. Our children's services, many of you will know that we've been on a massive journey. We've actually well and truly on the way to become excellent. And I'm really pleased that we are now after special measures and we are being recognised now as one of the leaders in children's services, and we'll continue to do that. Housing services, K&H, we know we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm really pleased that we're actually now well on the way to actually bring housing back in house. And again, that is from my point of view is open democracy, because we will put members back at the heart of housing, because some of these issues are prevalent in many of our housing estates where we need to actually get a grip of what the real issues are. The council combines the brilliance of everybody who lives out there in our communities, and the plan actually fuses the private sector, the voluntary sector, and the councillors and all our partners together. And the plan is talking about honest challenges. It talks about the difficult issues, and until we are honest and accept the challenges in front of us and have that debate, we'll move forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are finished, right? Yeah, but I'm sure there'll be more questions that will come out, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that and reserve the right, please.
Thank you. Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's always difficult with a report like this because it covers such a breadth of areas to actually do it justice in a short speech. So I'll talk about a number of areas within it rather than talk about the entire plan across it as an attempt to compromise. But would just like to recognise firstly and thank all those who've been involved in pulling this report together. I know it's difficult and there's a lot of information to consider in terms of trying to produce something that covers the breadth of the council's activities, but is also relatively brief, so it's something that can be digested. I'd like to start by focusing and just drawing people's attention to, I'm just trying to find the right page, with page 100, where it talks about independent, and really about one of the real big successes of this year, which has been the way in which we've been able to support homeless people. and the working together between some funding provided by the government and the excellent work done by our team, where my understanding is we got everybody bar one person indoors. There's one person who actually just for their own reasons refused to move into some form of supported accommodation. And I think the ambition to try and build on that, keep those relationships going and keep those people in accommodation is a really, really valuable one. And I'm fully supportive of that. And I think this is an area that does tend to sometimes be overlooked. It's not an area where people tend to talk about very much, but it's helping those who are at the most vulnerable in our society. I'm perhaps less supportive of the aim to be efficient and effective. And again, just for brevity, a couple of examples of that. I think we were slow to reopen our libraries, and I've said so in previous meetings and in previous council meetings, when members of the public are saying, why can I go and browse and borrow or buy books in a bookstore but can't use my library? It does leave us looking a bit as though we were behind the pace on that one. Similarly, I have spoken several times about our waste collection and specifically about the way in which we won't allow people to recycle cardboard. Again, if we were being efficient and effective, that would be in place. It's something I raised a number of weeks ago, and as yet nothing has happened effectively about it. So we're not being that effective or efficient in the terms in which we enable people to recycle what is probably one of the easiest things to recycle, and also for which there's a ready market. And highways, I'm sure everybody on this call will have an example of highways where perhaps it's not as effective and efficient as they would like. And just one example I'll give you regarding just where I noticed a sign that was damaged and I reported it. And after a couple of months, yes, they came and they put the sign back up, but they put it pointing in the wrong direction. So then they had to come out again and put that right. And when they put it right, they didn't fasten it on properly, so it fell off again. So it took 3 visits to get one sign repaired. That's an example of where we're not being effective and efficient. And I think we have to be honest enough, as Shabir said, we have to be honest about what is good and what isn't good in the community. I welcome the fact that this year we're trying to be accountable and we have outcomes, but really for outcomes to be effective, they need not only to be measurable, but we need to understand what the ambitions are. So what is our targets? Because there are no targets in here at all. So you'll have a comment that will say, if I just pluck out waste recycling rate, but you've no idea what the council's ambition is for
30
waste
seconds
recycling.
left. 30 seconds.
So you're unable to be able to determine next year whether we were successful or not. So I welcome some move in stating outcomes, Shabir, but if you want to be accountable, you have to state what your ambition is as well. Thank you.
Councillor Carl Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank you, Councillor Pandor, for the report and going through the ambitions of your plan for the council and incorporating that and taking into account all the good work that takes place throughout the authority, working with people, partners in place, and also the people who've helped put this report together. You asked for input during your speech and about opening up democracy and putting councillors at the heart of what we do. A little bit of that sooner would have been more helpful to deliver this and to achieve your ambitions. Council's unique knowledge of local communities, businesses and places, their service delivery and regulatory functions combined with their partnership and procurement power enables them to drive carbon emissions across the whole area. I'm focusing on the clean and green element of your report, which is page 18 on the plan, page 104 on the papers. Now, local authority programmes. So Kirklees has the opportunity to deliver programmes and interventions which can also deliver better public health, reduce inequalities, a healthier environment, encourage sustainable consumption and thriving local economies. Conversations need to take place sooner rather than later. Delivering us with your plan after the event isn't helpful. If you're genuine about this, please involve members sooner rather than later. On the clean and green element of your report, what you're aiming to achieve, well-planned places and sustainable communities. Again, this is where ward members can play a big part in delivering some of your ambitions. And I know certainly in the Linley ward, we are ambitious for our area and for our communities within the Linley ward. Myself, Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Smith, and we'd like to discuss them further, especially when it comes to air quality around schools and around our built-up areas. We have long championed the need for more monitoring devices. We have some, we need more electric vehicle charging points. We want to close streets near to our schools. We want to put a pilot in place. We have not been successful in doing that, and discussions came to a stop when we're trying to achieve that. So I would welcome the opportunity to have a clear dialogue to be able to try and achieve some of your own ambitions in our communities. I'm putting councillors at the heart of what you're trying to achieve in a genuine and meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Alison Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to keep this fairly short. I just want to make a few points. Again, I'd just like to say that councillors haven't been included in the production of the proposed our council plan, and I feel that as council members we should be placed at the heart of the council, and we should be able to reach out to our community groups and support them with signposting, advice and guidance. And I feel we should have been included in the production of this proposed plan. Just a bit on the economic recovery plan. While the economic impacts of the pandemic have been felt by those who are already disadvantaged in many areas, I think it's severely impacted upon young people. In this case, more so because the retail and hospitality sectors have been impacted so badly. So for me, the economic recovery presents an opportunity to put forward transformational policies that place people and the environment at the heart of the recovery. Earlier this year, the government announced £40 million Green Recovery Challenge Fund. This was aimed at delivering thousands of jobs, yet I see no evidence that any money's been applied for, that there's any evidence of those kind of jobs that the council are going to be creating. Although I did note that you are working in partnership with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust in relation to rewilding. But again, there's no reference as to whether you're creating green jobs through that scheme, and I wondered if you'd actually made a bid for any of that money. And then I'd just like to again talk about tackling air quality. It's great that you recognise the importance of improving air quality. You've expanded free parking for electric vehicles and hybrids, and you're working with Huddersfield University. These are all good things, and I welcome them. However, air pollution, it has to be taken seriously. It's a public health matter, and it causes the development of a range of medical issues. So we're having, 31,000 plus homes are being built across our area, which will inevitably mean an increase in vehicles on our roads. And I don't think it's in anyone's interest to be considering planning applications where no assessment on air quality is being carried out, or the cumulative impact of vehicles on air quality in our areas. So I believe more progress needs to be made on improving the measures that we're going to put in place in relation to air quality. I think schools need to be included. We need to have car-free zones around schools, and they need to be created now. I think the council should be working with all schools to find ways of encouraging more pupils to walk and cycle safely to school. Again, we need to be looking at how we can improve public transport. I think that's key to also reduce air quality, poor air quality. So to sum up, I'd just like to see more being done. in relation to air quality. As I say, I've raised a question on with regard to the green recovery deal, and I just think we need to be realistic, and I feel progress is too slow. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Andrew Cooper.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the clean and green elements of the council plan. And council plans are full of ambitions and things that the council wants to do, and so they should be. And of course, addressing the climate emergency in Kirklees and working towards net zero carbon emissions by 2038 is part of that. So I'm just going to mention a conversation I had with the principal contractor who's working on insulation for Better Homes Yorkshire, who from West Yorkshire Combined Authority, who are working on behalf of Kirklees. I got in touch with them and said, there's some insulation work that needs doing, and I'm wondering if you're going to have capacity to do it under the Green Homes Grant. They said, oh, sorry, you know, I'm really busy. And the reason I'm really busy is because Bradford Council applied for the local authority delivery funding under the Green Homes Grant, and they won it. And because they won it, I'm going to be really busy and strung out over the next few months. So I said, well, did Kirklees bid for it? I said, oh no, Kirklees didn't bid for it. Practically everybody who bid for it got it. But no, Kirklees didn't bid for it, and because Kirklees didn't bid for it, there's no money there. So I look at things like high-footing ambitions about addressing the climate emergency. I think if we haven't the capacity and capability to make a bid for money from government, which practically every council that bid for it got, what are we doing? And I look at things like, for instance, the greenhouse gas accounting tool. The local government association, I was aware that they were piloting this greenhouse gas accounting tool. They hadn't got a metropolitan authority on the list to do the work. And so I said, hey, Kirklees, we could get Kirklees to do this. And so I put it forward. Not the capacity, I'm afraid. And so I want to know really from Councillor Mather whether these ambitions that we actually have here are actually going to be matched by action, because it's quite clear that at the moment there's lots of talk but not a lot of action at all. So I love what's in the document. I just remain to be convinced that it's going to be delivered.
Thank you for that. Councillor Viv Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As might be no surprise to colleagues, I particularly want to talk about children's services and the part of the council plan that looks at that. Best Start is one of the 8 outcomes, and on page 98, I hope colleagues will have seen the Breaking Barriers project, which is looking at delivering meaningful engagement and positive engagement with youth-led activities as part of a deliberate priority to tackle inequalities. During this last year, Children's Services have developed the Children and Young People Plan. We've developed a suite of COVID-19 safe summer activities. I think there are 11,000 attendees, plus a lot of things that could be done at home as well. And contact and visits to our most vulnerable children and young people have continued, including care leavers. And there's been ongoing improvement to our offer for children and young people with special needs. But I suppose that the biggest thing for me on this long journey that Children's Services has had is what the leaders already referred to, is the removal of the improvement notice by the Secretary of State from Children's Services. And that's down to a whole raft of people and things and an immense amount of work. We have an excellent executive helping this improvement journey, our chief exec, our directors. We've superb cooperation from partners towards achieving improvements, and unwavering work from managers. And then there are no superlatives good enough to describe our officers in Children's Services, including the staff from Cal that were redeployed to Children's Services for the work that they've done. But I just want to sort of say to colleagues in this virtual chamber that actually probably all or most, if not all of you, have made a significant contribution to Children's Services in terms of those who sit on fostering or adoption panels, sit on the improvement board, corporate parenting, health and wellbeing board, children's scrutiny, and actually those counsellors who will have helped families who are struggling with casework in their wards and, you know, issues around domestic violence and so on. So for me, this plan, particularly children's part and particularly for health, is really, really significant, and I do hope colleagues in this chamber will be able to support it and see it as a plan that they are actually part of. I take Councillor Munro's comment, but you know, it's like a committee of 5,000. Now is the time to engage and be part of this plan, and I do hope colleagues will feel that they can adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we've got quite a few people to speak. We're going to close the list now. So the next person is Mark Thompson, Councillor Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I enjoyed reading the document, well written, summarised well, good points in there, lots of things that we should be doing. Read it and things like it in the past, and I don't want to be too sceptical on historical results, but looking over the last 10 to 14 years, where we've slipped down the slippery pole on most of our main actions as a council are concerned, from child services through to adult care, K&H. I'll start with K&H. It almost beggars belief that we think as a cabinet that we can bring K&H in-house and make a better job of it, when all we had to do as a cabinet was at arm's length look after the management team and the exec team and make sure that it delivered good services, just like you do with Cal. Why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we keep it at arm's length and make an excellent job of it? But no, it had to slip as far as housing development's concerned, as far as services to those people that are living in K&H. And now we think that bringing it in-house, we're going to do a better job. I think we should rethink that. I think we should realise our inadequacies and our foibles and failings as far as K&H is concerned, and look at the management structure and the way that the cabinet managed that organisation, rather than thinking bringing it in-house is going to make it all better. Because I can only see by the cabinet's track record that it's going to make it worse, looking at other avenues and departments within the cabinet. We talk about vulnerabilities and helping people during this pandemic. I think one of the things that's been brought to bear is the inadequacies of the cabinet during a period of time that's exaggerated. It's been exaggerated by the pandemic, and how we've let child services down, how we've let adult services down, and education process over a given period of time. That's where that's now been highlighted. So I think we should get our act together and take action on this plan, rather than writing a pretty plan and doing a pretty video. I think that there should be the strategy nailed down very, very quickly, bring everybody on board to agree it and move forward on it. And let's not have another year like the last 14, where we've just slipped down the slippery slope from exemplar to not even an also ran as far as the council's concerned. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to focus on the issue of the Kirklees being a high quality, clean and green environment, as set out from page 124 and 125 of the report. The report mentions Huddersfield in various forms, but omits a glowing success in Kirklees, which I wish to redress and hope the Cabinet will now join me on. We talk about in there about Beaumont Park achieving a green flag and things. But Mirfield in Bloom has, in the short time that it's been in existence, swept the board with the competitions and awards at Yorkshire in Bloom. So much so that Mirfield is now the Yorkshire entry for Britain in Bloom, and therefore by default is representing Kirklees. But it's no mention of this great community accolade in here. So I hope you'll recognise that today and do so and join me in congratulating everybody at Mirfield in Bloom on their excellent work and community involvement. For a high quality, clean, green environment, can you please today confirm Councillor McBride's statement to Cabinet yesterday, which said that he has removed the destruction of the ancient Clifton Woods from all options of the Cooper Bridge bypass being considered? That was the information which was put into public 2 years ago, and at Cabinet yesterday, Councillor McBride said there will be no destruction of those ancient woodlands. I'd like that confirming to all members of Cabinet, to Council and to the public today that was said yesterday. Because that demands that the public is now being told what you're considering. There has been no feedback. You talked about being accountable. In the 2 years since what would be an expensive consultation exercise, you have not fed back to the public what's happening with that scheme. You've not analysed their comments and presented them in a way that the public could see what you're doing. So I'm pleased to see that you want to be more accountable. Can that start with this scheme? Again, referring to clean, green environmental vision and plan, there are no details of how you want to achieve an increase in active travel in the Kirklees community, which must be vital in improving the air quality and addressing the things that you're talking about. Kirklees has subscribed at West Yorkshire level to some ambitious targets. It was mentioned earlier that targets must be there and they must be measurable. So let's put those targets in the public domain for people. Kirklees has said that it wants to see private car use decline by up to 38%, that it wants to see rail use increase by 53%, and very pleasing to see, you want to see increase in travel by cycle by 2,000%. Now, despite the disparaging comments of Councillor McBride before, let's see how you are going to achieve this. Because from what we've seen of Kirklees' views on rail, it's very dismissive of anywhere other than Huddersfield or Dewsbury. There are many railway stations, and colleagues will know these, the ones that are serviced by the Penistone line, a vital link serving north-south. The ones up the Colne Valley, where we were talking today at Wicker about that. And there's a small railway station which people may have heard of, which has the only direct link to London from Kirklees, which is Mirfield. If you want to achieve these targets, then work with the people and see that. Put some meat behind it, not just concentrate on the usual two. Councillor Pandor, you asked to be held to account. And can I put on the record today that I will gladly join you in holding you to account. I will fully play my part in doing that. And I hope that you and your Cabinet colleagues will play your part and commit that from now on, your Cabinet will not hide behind officers when there's any media inquiries, will not shy away from meeting the public, and that the Cabinet, who are responsible for all services, will be doing it. Now, I know probably we've lost one vital asset as a council spokesman recently, but let's see that in future it will be Councillor Pandor addressing the media, Councillor so-and-so addressing something, and it won't be an anonymous council spokesman. You want to be held to account, and I'm here to see that you are. Thank you.
Councillor Bolt, 30 seconds.
Sorry, do you want me to carry on? I had finished, but I'll carry on.
No, 30 seconds. You've got 20 seconds now.
I can do a song and dance act for 20 seconds.
Oh, no, thank you. Councillor John Lawson.
Hello, Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, there's just a couple of points that I'd like to make about this document. Sorry, just messages flicking up on screen there. Firstly, its name, it's called Our Council Plan. It isn't, quite frankly. We all know it isn't. The point was made very well by Councillors Burke and Monroe that this is the administration's council plan. There is plenty, though, in it not to disagree with, but there's also plenty of it, even though it says it's intentionally short. I'd comment that the new 8th outcome took a little bit of figuring out just to see exactly what it was from the report. Whether it was effective and efficiencies or tackling inequalities. I plumped for efficient and effective, but it did feel a bit like the Monty Python Spanish Inquisition sketch when they kept adding their chief weapons. More seriously, I had hoped that on the back of conversations circulating through council since the first lockdown, we might have seen an element of them reflected in here. I'm talking specifically about how we address the huge surge in volunteers we saw during that time. On page 95 of our papers, we see at the top of the page the proper recognition of staff and volunteers' contributions and how proud we are of them. But then we make them distinct and different from partners. It's something that we do repeatedly. We've done it for a long time, and we have to find a way of changing that. In my book, if you're a volunteer, if you're volunteering in your community, if you're caring for a family member or a neighbour, you're a partner. And we have to recognise that if we ever want communities to have a sense of ownership of council and that sense of doing with, not to principle. In our local food bank, volunteering is still going strong, but as we get into the thick of what's to come, we'll find those who donate now might be needing services in the future, and those who volunteer now might need our support. I would have liked to have seen that in the council plan, but dearly hope that we can continue to work on that somewhere else. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Andrew Marchington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say, with Shabir's introduction, it just felt like we'd started the next debate early. Didn't feel like Shabir was talking to the council plan, and I think that's part of the issue. When we had the Local Government Association peer review earlier on, there was elements about leadership, and I think that's one or two of the points I want to make. I want to start off on a positive, and then there's going to be a but. I do want to thank officers for the amounts of work that they have put in to this, and some excellent work there. Also want to compliment the leadership we have been receiving from Viv Kendrick around children's services. As Chair of Scrutiny, Children's Scrutiny, sorry Liz, witnessing a greater depth of scrutiny going on about the data around children's services, that striving for improvement around in Corporate Parent Board or the Children's Improvement Board, that is going on. There is a clear vision of where we are and where we want to be. And I think there has been a crest for all of us as a council to engage in that. We are all, children, young people, the community and councillors, on the improvement journey. And Viv continues to stress that by her actions and the contributions that they make. So that's a real positive. But I want to present a but. I'm glad that Rob Walker's indicated he wants to address the issue about the Green Delivery Grant. Just be really interested if we can have a detailed discussion on that. That's just appalling. We seem to have gone as a council from a national leader, if not an international leader, on some elements of green issues, to falling behind. We had the Warm Zone Plus project, where every house in the borough, 200,000 properties, were offered the opportunity for higher levels of insulation, and Miller Patterson, we had the capacity to deliver in terms of photovoltaics, in terms of insulation, all of that. The fact that some 10 years later that capacity appears to have disappeared is not acceptable. Why has that been allowed to happen? So it is that concerns us, and we know we're in difficult times, and we've been in difficult times, but there's also opportunities, and we need to do the best that we can for our residents. So that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me, and again, one of the things that some of us have been banging on for a long time about, is the incinerator on Leeds Road. It does generate significant amounts of electricity from the waste that is burnt down there. But what happens to the heat? And when this report was last presented to the to us. The officers explained that there are plans to, with the Huddersfield blueprint, to pipe heat into Huddersfield and to other areas, so that actually it does become a waste to energy plant as opposed to just a waste to electricity plant. But the cabinet member who's then responsible for that did not appear to be aware of it, and I've looked for where this is in the plan, our vision, and it doesn't appear to be there. And I just worry that that massive opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint that we've been striving for a long time, if we really do want to be carbon zero in the timescales indicated, somebody needs to be keeping an eye on that and make sure it happens. Otherwise, it's going to be forgotten. So I'm concerned about that. Aspire and achieve, and again, it's been a difficult year for our children and young people, for all children and young people who've been taking examinations. But I've got a few concerns about the reports being presented on page 116 or 10 of 25 of the report. The data about GCSE results, the narrative does not appear to relate to the bar chart that's presented. Perhaps Carol, I know Patterson's indicating to speak afterwards. Perhaps she can explain that, because what that shows to me is in Kirklees there's a massive drop off between 2018 and 2019 in terms of the outcomes. Well, that's the last 2 years, isn't it? But it's but there has been a concern this year that because we've got the two large colleges in Kirklees doing external examinations.
30 seconds.
Yeah, Huddersfield New College and Greenhead, that's had a disproportionate impact on what happened. So, yeah, there is a lot of good stuff in there, but it's and it's about the leadership that is presented to make sure that this does become the vision for the whole of this council and also for the whole of this borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Carol Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm glad finally that somebody did actually mention aspire and achieve, because I have to say that there is so much that the education services in our schools, our early years services, have been doing throughout this year. There is so much more. I think the plan is excellent, but it is simple is not the right word, but there is just so much more that could be said to go into a plan, but it would be using up far too many trees to actually publish all of that. I think it's a great simplification of our ambition is this plan, and particularly aspire and achieve. I mean, we do want to have an excellent education offer for all our children from early years right through to 19 and 24 in some cases, and it is absolutely to be commended that all our schools right across the authority, right across Kirklees, have been able to maintain an excellent education offer throughout this pandemic. And they've done so much more than that. They have taken on the welfare of their families. They've taken on the welfare of their children. They've made sure they've got fed. And they've made sure that they have got the IT equipment that they need to access on learning at home. And some of the heads that I've been speaking to throughout this pandemic are absolutely amazing in terms of the commitment that they have shown to their children and to their schools. And I can't thank them enough, to be honest. And besides all of that, we have still been doing business as usual. There's still an awful lot as well that happens in the education service, in the education world, which has got absolutely, is not just children in schools. We have been maintaining all of that all the way through this pandemic. So I just have to, as I say, commend everyone that works within the service. And just as an example, to come back to Councillor Munro, I mean, some of the things that can't be, because everything can't be within that plan. yes, of course, we encourage schools to have encourage green initiatives with their children within the schools, to encourage walking buses, to encourage safe transport policies around the schools, etc. Of course, we do that alongside many of the other things. And just for instance, within my own ward, 2 of our schools now, they've all got yellow vests which they wear on their way to school and on the way home from school, which is a great improvement in terms of safety of those children, and means I saw them today that an awful lot of them are actually walking to school and not being transported by their parents. And just to come back to the point mentioned by Councillor Marchington, yes, unfortunately there was a dip the last year. It was at 0.3. I have to, if you're talking about the attainment 8 score, it was only 0.3. I mean, it's not a massive dip. It was 0.3. It's and mind you, I have to actually say I don't understand on that same table that you were talking about. I don't actually understand the English table, the England scores there. That doesn't actually seem to be right. But it is something, of course. We will, want to do better in future, and it isn't just the schools.
Councillor Partisan, 30 seconds.
It is the education services as well, working through the Education Partnership Learning Board to improve that level of performance in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mother.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to start off with I'm having terrible problems with my connectivity today, but I'd like to start off with responding to Councillor Taylor, who is being a bit disingenuous and less than honest about his cardboard issue. There is an issue. There has been ongoing discussions with him, and like the rest of us, he needs to use the green bin to dispose of his cardboards. We are currently in discussions, and he knows I said I would make a public announcement, and it will be sometime this week. And as for Councillor Cooper, it would be good to talk. I know you're on our combined green panel. You have lots of ideas, but it would actually be good for you to come and talk to me sometimes. And I'd like to talk about capacity. I don't know, sometimes we live in cloud cuckoo land. What we've experienced over the last 10 years has been the most drastic cuts in local government, where we've cut frontline services to the bare bones, and we talk about all these projects. Yes, if capacity is cut, it takes time to bring it up to speed, and we are aware of all the amazing projects and funding that's around, but we have to be focused in relation to our plans and what is possible. In relation to the heat network, the pilot was a success. We've arrived at a stage where we're putting together a business case, and I believe we can deliver on that. In relation to air quality, we always carry out assessment on air qualities on any build. We know for a fact there are a lot of improvements being made on various transport routes, and on A629, for example, there's going to be improvement in congested junctions, which will further improve air quality. We have brought more equipment for schools to monitor air quality. We have put in place, and we are finding more locations to put electric vehicle charging points. We have made a very significant commitment to make Kirklees completely carbon neutral by 2038, and we're progressing on that. The climate emergency work programme has been included in this plan, and we've mentioned the disclosure of the district's emission each year to the Independent Carbon Disclosure Project, and we have addressed all of the plans that we put together for climate emergency, from net zero carbon emission target to 2038, to the disclosure of the district's annual waste emissions, to building our commitments to improve our waste and recycling performance, not only halting the recent decline in the recycling rate, but reversing the trend. And we seem to forget that we were the first to go into a PFI contract on waste, and is coming to an end. So we have those issues to deal with whilst we're revving up for a new contract. This one comes to the end in 2023. We have continued to promote the Grow Our Own Garden Waste service to support over 24,500 residents in composting their own garden waste. We have, over the past year, undertaken strategic environmental investment to see how we can best manage our waste in the future. And I mentioned to Councillor Taylor just yesterday that the resource and waste management strategy engagement exercise is due to start at the end of this month. So if I had more time, we could have further discussions, and I'd like colleagues to come to me and talk about these things. There's never enough time to talk here, but I am proud of the work we're doing, and I'd like to applaud what our staff are able to achieve given the capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I've seen a lot of council plans over the years. No one will question the commitment to deal with the pandemic, and the plan is dominated by COVID, and that is to be expected. But we have to recognise the negatives as well as the positives that persisted pre-COVID that remain to this day. On page 129, it says, over the past year, we have moved positively towards becoming a more transparent, well-managed and high-performing council. This is a good ambition to have, but we have to acknowledge that some of our services are struggling and have been struggling for a long time. These I would include planning, public rights of way, waste recycling, bin collections, environmental health services, highway safety. Those are the main ones that cause me a lot of problems and complaints from members of the public. We've a big problem at the moment with complaints not being recorded, with complaints being lost, and people left to wonder if the council is interested in their plight. It's a real problem that has to be addressed. As for transparency, I'd say the council has a long way to go to achieve this aspiration, especially given most ward councillors are told very little these days. In all the years I've been a ward councillor, I think we get to know less now than we've ever known before. And I think I don't understand why that is, because communication should be better than it was in the past. But even when things are happening in our wards, we don't know about it and often find out by reading the newspapers, which is totally unacceptable. I think people are fed up with paying high council tax. Councillor Pandor said, you want us to do the right thing. Well, I would say in response to that, let's not push the negatives under the carpet. Let's see this council address all these problems. They need tackling. They need to be addressed. Let's not use COVID as the latest excuse for problems that persisted before COVID. with some of our services. We have a long way to go, in my eyes, to become a high-performing council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Michael Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As documents go, I think this is actually fairly punchy. With a plan like this, it's important to me to be setting out the objectives that the plan seeks to achieve, and I think it does this. You can read through this and you can see quite clearly where we're looking to get to, and I think this is set out in the section on shared outcomes at page 97 of the bundle, page 11 of the actual plan. So credit where credit's due. I think it reads pretty well. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just drill down into one of those shared objectives, and this relates to children, and this is on page 98, page 12 of the actual plan itself. And children are very important. That goes without saying. We've had some issues with children's service in Kirklees, and fair play. I'd like to give credit to Councillor Kendrick here, because I think she's done a very good job actually of leading us through that process and bringing us out the other side. And indeed, there's an appendix 2 to this at page 107 of the bundle, which sets out some of the things that we've achieved with children. And again, I think that's actually quite a nice little document to summarise some of the achievements. So credit where credit's due there. But looking specifically at page 98, there's a lot of good stuff in there as well. In terms of what we're seeking to achieve: confident children ready to do well at school and in life, better outcomes for vulnerable children, child-focused activities that support families, and as many children as possible staying with their families. And for me, these are really important objectives. And if we look down at the bottom, we talk about measuring our impact, school readiness, good level of development at the end of reception, placement stability for our looked after children, and so forth. And that last one particularly is something that I've got a keen interest in, seeing that children in care are stable and well looked after. And the bit that I'm struggling with is the box in the middle that talks about tackling inequalities. And if I'm blunt, I really just don't understand it. I don't understand how that dovetails in with everything that's around it. It begins by saying that education-related inequalities have a defining impact over a person's lifetime, not just in childhood. And I get that. I can understand that. And the same sentence continues and says, and we recognise that civic appointments are not representative of our society in terms of black and BAME representation. Now, I don't understand why we're moving from talking about educational opportunity to civic appointments. I don't understand what are these civic appointments we're talking about. I mean, the mayor is a civic appointment. So I'm struggling with that, and it may be that somebody can help me with that and expand on it. And it goes on. It says permanent school exclusions for Black African, Black Caribbean, Black British children in England are around 3 times the exclusion rate for all other pupils. I don't understand how an England level statistic is directly relevant to what we're trying to achieve in Kirklees. I would have thought we ought to be looking at Kirklees statistics there. So again, I just don't understand how that dovetails with the section above in terms of outcomes for children and so forth. It then goes to talk on about the Breaking Barriers project that will focus on delivering meaningful engagement and positive youth-led activities to help tackle this. And that presumably is again focusing on the exclusion rate for pupils in England. And this includes by working with Black and BAME young adults aged 16 to 30 to design a leadership program. So if we're now talking about the 16 to 30s, we're moving beyond children, really, well into adulthood there. So again, that doesn't seem to fit here. To deliver a campaign to listen to and involve Black young people in social action and opportunities to explore issues of heritage and identity in Black History Month. And the bit that I'm really struggling with is how on any reading of it, how a project that is all about delivering a campaign to listen to and involve Black young people in social action, well, again, what does that mean? An opportunity to explore issues of heritage and identity in Black History Month. How is that going to deliver the 2 impacts that we've got below? So school readiness, good level of development at the end of reception, placement stability for our looked after children and all our children, not just Black ones, because that must be what we aspire to. And how does that piece there, that delivering a campaign to listen to and involve Black young people in social action? Councillor
Watson, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And opportunity to explore issues of heritage and identity in Black History Month. How does that deliver the objectives above of confident children, better outcomes, child-focused activities, and as many children as possible staying with their families?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I just remind members that we are actually talking on council plan, our council plan, not the next item. So next is Councillor Rob Walker.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to respond to Councillor Munro and Councillor Marchington. Just to start off with a positive, really, that I very much agree with them that it's really important that as an authority, we're alert to potential sources of funding that we can use to improve our environment. What I do worry about a little bit is when people make very sweeping and condemning statements about the council without checking the facts. I think it's always a good idea to speak to people about things before commenting on it. So I would have welcomed some contact really before the meeting. Looking at the Green Recovery Fund, I think we were told that we haven't put in a bid for this, and this was appalling. This is not true. We were very much involved in bidding for this funding. If they'd have looked at this in a little bit more detail, they would have realised that any bid had to come in, it couldn't come in directly from a council. It had to come in from a third sector organisation. And we were very much involved in a project which was submitted by the deadline, by the 24th of September. And this was a project which involved quite a number of partners. So it was led by Experience Community, who are a charity who work getting disabled people out into the countryside, improving access to the countryside for disabled people, the Canal and River Trust, and the National Trust. We worked extremely closely with them. There were several officers who spent a lot of time, even though they were under pressure doing other things, helping them to put the bid together. We also worked with quite a number of other smaller local groups, such as Marsden Community Trust. And this bid was looking at the upper reaches of the River Cone and the upper reaches of the Huddersfield Narrow Canal, looking at access both for disabled people and able-bodied people into the countryside. It was looking at improving habitats in that area, and it was looking at improving biodiversity. One of the things that was quite original about this bid was that it was designed so that disabled people could become more involved in those activities. So the bid was submitted. Unfortunately, it was not successful. It wasn't actually a big pot of money for the whole country, but the bid was commended. The other good news is that the partners that were involved, even though the bid was not successful, are continuing to work and look at other ways in which this work could be funded. Indeed, there is a piece of work starting next week. There are further meetings to look at doing this. And this is really important, I think, that it is an example of where, as an authority, we are working much more closely with partners in our countryside. So we mentioned Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. That's part of the report. That's the tip of the iceberg. We're doing a lot more of this. And again, next week, we've got a specific meeting, an element of which is going to be led by the Environment Agency. It's designed to look at the whole plethora of different pots of money which are available at the moment, and looking at how, as a partner with other organisations, can look at bidding for those sources of funding so that we can conduct projects. So I think this is actually an area where we can be proud of our record and proud of our plans for the future. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been an interesting debate, and I agree with many of the comments that have been made by councillors, particularly across the opposition benches, so I'm going to keep my comments quite short. I often find, Mr. Mayor, that what's noticeably absent tells us more than what's actually there sometimes, and this is the case with this report, because it goes to great lengths to detail what the administration says are the council's visions, its ways of working, its values, its shared outcomes, etc. And it also says we strive to be inclusive, kind, proud, honest, positive, flexible, respectful, communicative and supportive, and that's all very admirable stuff, which I'm not going to knock. It wants residents to feel aspirational, safe, independent, clean and green. Again, yep, put my hand up for that. And then it goes on to tell us some of the achievements we would like to see. And again, that's very welcome to see. But what I do find worrying is that all this legitimate values and visions stuff has got to go hand in hand with an intent to deliver good quality services to residents. And that, after all, is the point of us being a council in the first place. The two really must go together. With visions and values, we've got to have action. And Councillor Cooper made that point very well in his speech earlier on. Sentiments alone aren't enough. A list of what we want to achieve is not enough. Some famous wordsmith said, fine words, butter no parsnips. I'm sure it was either Shakespeare or Eric Morecambe, one or the other. But anyway, that's irrelevant. I looked at what the definition of a plan is, and when I looked in the dictionary, it said a plan is a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. Well, we know what they want to achieve, but we don't know how they're going to do it, and as such, it doesn't really qualify as a plan in my mind. I do find it quite introspective as well. It does say a lot about how we, the council, do things, rather than saying how we aim to meet the expectations of the residents. Much of the report is laudable, I think, in its intent, but I think the thing that matters to the public is, do all these visions and values translate into better and more efficient services? And the answer to that, I'm afraid, is rather conspicuous by its absence. Just to finish off, Mr. Mayor, as other members have alluded to in this debate, I'm afraid the epitaph of this rather ailing and flailing Labour administration is going to be all talk and no action. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Can I just remind members that at the start of the meeting, we did say that when the item starts, you can register to speak. But we haven't started the next item. We're already getting, councillor members registering to speak. So can you please do not do that? Just if you need to say anything, just write, but you can't actually register to speak. So next person is Graham Turner. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Like any plan, we're never all going to agree on it, are we? We're a different political party, different political persuasions, different genders, different backgrounds, so we're never going to agree on it. But I think listening to the debate tonight, there's a consensus that it's not bad. It's not bad. There wasn't a lot of, apart from one or two comments, most people seem to take on board what we're trying to achieve and the aims and outcomes we're looking to achieve. So I think it's to be recommended to council. So a lot of the items were picked up by the relevant portfolio holders. I'll just pick up on a couple of ones, and no doubt John will be expecting me to come back. We saw in the video there, the Councillor Taylor should have said, the fantastic work that the library service did during the pandemic, which wasn't library related in the early days. Yes, you're right, John, we closed the service down, but that was in line with lockdown rules. The library service all went out and did a huge amount of work in other areas, ringing all those people over 70, having conversation with them, making sure they were all right. They went in to help them with delivering food and preparing food parcels. So they were all actually really, really busy just doing other things. And while we were a bit late bringing them back in, it's an arguable point. But it was difficult because, as I said, we had them doing other things, so to bring them back in took them away from what they were doing, so it took some time. As you well know, we have a huge amount of volunteers, and we don't have that at the moment because of obviously a lot of them are shielding and don't want to be out with the public. So we could probably argue whether we were a bit late or a bit early, but the fact that we have started to reopen the service, it's proven incredibly popular. We had a really good outcome from the officers and staff while during the lockdown. So yeah, but as I said, we can argue about that if you like, but I think we did the right thing. And the library staff have been fantastic. The way they adapted to doing other things, and I had no input into that video, John. I think you perhaps thought I might have done, but I didn't. But it did highlight the fantastic library service we got and the great people we have working from them. We were supposed to have had this break by now, so I'm not going to go on any great detail. I was just wanted to pick that point up. There's just one other thing. If Councillor Bolt is just to remind him, I have never shied away from doing anything in public, and I have never ever shied away from doing a press conference or a press release with the examiner, who I spoke to at least 3 times this week already. So I'm not one of them. I'm not one of them, Martin, as I know you're not. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We've got Shabir Pando. We've just gone past 7:15. Well, it's 7:30 nearly. So we're not having a break. We're just going straight through. So Shabir Pando.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, thanks for some very, very good contributions, and a lot of members have actually responded to some of the issues that have been raised. I just want to focus on 1 or 2 things, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, the slippery slope that was mentioned by one of our councillors. He mentioned three particular areas: adult social care, children's, and K&H. Adult social care is one of the best in the country, right? Yeah, so I don't know why he's actually singled that out. Children's services, like Councillor Watson quite rightly acknowledged, the tremendous work that has been carried out. Councillor Viv Kendrick leading that with the support of the full council. So I was completely astounded where he was coming from. And then he went on to actually talk about the Almo in more detail. To be honest with you, it shows the lack of knowledge. Let me just be very clear with him. The Almo was created as a result of 1997 Labour government coming in power. The reason why the Almo was created was to access decent homes funding. There was a backlog of housing maintenance investment, totaling 92 billion nationally. And to actually address that backlog, the Almo was created. You had to go through an inspection process to get 3 stars, 2 stars or more. And one way to access that money was to create an Almo. So the sole purpose of creating that was to address the 20 years prior to 1997 of the abysmal state of council housing. There were massive disrepair, and that's what the Labour government came and did that. And the reason why we've actually taken that Almo back in is because the purpose of that has now been discharged. A lot of the local authorities, most of them, if not all of them, have actually taken the Almo back in-house. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to provide a better service, and we want to actually make sure that we carry on the improvements that were developed then. So, knowledge is very, very important before you actually talk, right? Yeah, because some of the stuff she said was completely below the belt. In terms of the plan, this plan, the focus of this plan is around inequalities. The next item is around setting up an equalities commission. So I just want to clarify that. I think one of the members may have got read the thing wrongly. The other thing I want to just mention about is accountability. We'll be accountable for what we are saying, but for accountability to take place, you need to have constructive accountability and constructive debate. So Martin, I really enjoy having a banter with you, but we will be accountable. But at the same time, right, yeah, you've got to accept that, we won't always be able to do what you want to do. Otherwise, right, yeah, this council will become bankrupt, right, yeah, so, we'll be accountable for what we say we'll do, not what you want us to do. So there's a big difference there. But having said that, I'm always more than happy to, Martin, you should bring any issues to me, I'll have more than happy to help. But there needs to be, honest accountability and honest holding someone to be accountable, not about point scoring. Those are the show I want to talk about, just about the inequalities that Councillor Watson mentioned. I've just had a look at that, Councillor Watson, and they're just statistics, probably. And I think the reason why the statistics are in there is to highlight the fact that if you are from a black Afro-Caribbean background, you are 3 times more likely to be excluded from school, and that's the national averages actually, right? Yeah. But having said that, there are other indicators. For example, if you are a white child, you are less likely to go to university. So there's a load of stuff in there, and that's what I'm hoping that the next stage, which is the item 8, is to develop an equalities commission, and I hope we can get people like yourselves on board, that we can actually start to filter down and address the bigger issues. And the other issue is inequality of power. What we're talking about is inequality as we know them, but there's a massive issue around inequality of power.
30 seconds, Shabir.
I finished. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much for that. We now move to the vote.
Councillor Pandor.
For.
Councillor David Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor Lawson.
Abstain.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Greaves.
For.
Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Armour.
Abstain.
Councillor Asif. Councillor Asif. Councillor Bellamy.
Abstain.
Councillor Bolt.
Oh, sorry, I was just looking back to see if Councillor Pandor had answered my question about Cooper Bridge, but seeing as he didn't, I'll abstain.
Councillor Burke.
Abstain. Abstain.
Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Paula Davies.
Abstain.
Councillor Paul Davies.
For.
Councillor Eastwood.
Abstain.
Councillor Donald Firth.
Abstain.
Councillor Eric Firth.
For.
Councillor Granger Mead.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Hall.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
Abstain.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Mr. Mayor.
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain.
For.
Councillor Iredale. Councillor Iredale. Councillor Korshik.
For.
Councillor Kendrick.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Lees Hamilton.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Richards.
For.
Councillor Lowe.
For.
Councillor Lukic.
Against.
Councillor Lyons.
For.
Councillor Marchington.
Abstain.
Councillor Mather. Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor McBride. Councillor McBride.
He's taking his baton because you won't let him speak.
I'll try and come back. Councillor McGuinn.
Abstain.
Councillor Munro.
Abstain.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
For.
Councillor O'Donovan.
For.
Councillor Patrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Pinnock. Councillor Sarwar.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Smage.
Abstain.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor John Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Uller.
For.
Councillor Uppal.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Warner.
For.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Zaman.
For.
Just have one more check for Councillor Asif. No, still not there. That recommendation is carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that. Now we're moving on to item 8. Council is asked to consider the proposal for the ways in which the council will tackle inequalities. Actually, you can actually start to register to speak now. So it's Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll be glad that it's not going to be as long as my previous speech. We've just had a debate regarding the council plan, and the proposals that this paper is to actually develop a policy commission. And the proposals are around focus what the council will be doing in the next 12 months. It's more important than ever, Mr. Mayor, that we support the people at the margins of our society. You know, to draw on the best practice locally, nationally, and elsewhere, and to develop actions in terms of how we move forward. The invitation is really to actually get everybody to get involved to help tackle the inequalities that impact on people's lives. Things are getting in a situation where, you know, this is not an item for any one political group. A political group has no monopoly over fairness. Fairness should be a theme that runs through every single political party. And I won't profess that, you know, Labour Party knows it all on this. So I'm hoping that everybody gets on board. No organisation or no community can say that, you know, they are vanguards of equality or fairness. You know, this is something that society needs to actually address and tackle. You know, that is what will bind us together.
Can I just ask members to turn your mics off because there's a lot of background noise and it's not fair for the speaker. Thank you.
Don't worry, Mr. Mayor, I'm used to it. You know, I've been zooming.
Speak a bit louder, Shabir.
Many months, right? Yeah, so you get used to it, yeah. So, Mr. Mayor, basically, right, what we need to do is base our actions on data, what the data tells us, and more importantly, we need to engage with people from all walks of life. We're proposing to create an Equalities Commission, like I said to you before, to understand what makes a difference and then to act on it. Working together on this invitation, I am hoping that, you know, we have a debate, but I'm hoping at the end of the debate, we can actually come to a consensus and get this commission up and running. The commission will be doing some work over the next 12 months, and then 18 months time we'll come back and have a look and reflect and see what went well, what didn't go so well, and how can we improve it moving forward. One final word, Mr. Mayor. To reduce inequalities, it makes business sense. It reduces costs and it improves efficiency and effectiveness. So this is more about business sense, not just about doing the right thing. Happy to carry the debate on, Mr. Mayor, and I hope that we get some good contributions. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Can I just say that we've got quite a few, over 10, maybe 15 people to speak. And I think that will take us into maybe nearly into 8:30. And I would ask to defer the next item. Yeah. If we could defer the next item because we won't have enough time. So can we have this? Can somebody second this, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second this and reserve the right. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Who was the first person to speak?
On this list it was, hang on, just bear with me.
Martin Bolt.
No, it wasn't.
No, it's not. Councillor Bill Armour.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Inequality is a very broad and multifaceted topic. And I believe that there are many issues around tackling inequalities in the borough that need to be addressed. Colleagues have their own specific points to raise, so I will confine myself to a brief discussion of some disability-related inequalities. This subtopic is itself complex, with newborns judged to be disabled having relatively low postnatal survival rates, fetuses labelled disabled having high abortion rates, disabled young people and adults struggling to gain acceptance in so-called mainstream education and work, and disabled elders too often put aside from society. In the COVID context, this is demonstrated by high death rates in some care homes and by the increasing social isolation endured by disabled people and often their carers, both in care homes and at home. COVID has greatly magnified the social inequality of disabled people. It's important to note that, although as people age they have an increased risk of developing impairments, both cognitive and physical, disability is something which can affect anyone, regardless of age, ethnicity, culture or social class. It is colourblind and cares not for gender or sexual orientation. Why then does this council so often, I'm sorry to say this, that so often seem to pay little more than lip service to disability? If that is, the topic is actually addressed. In the report accompanying this debate, the word disability appears once, as an isolated bullet point on page 138. There's no further discussion of the topic that I can see, yet I'm willing to bet that everyone here has a family member, friend or neighbour who is disabled. Disability is not so much a hidden source of inequality, it is one which is far too often willfully ignored by society. Moving now to mobility impairment specifically, it's commonplace to declare that one organisation is structurally racist, another structurally sexist. I'm here to say that this council is literally structurally disablist. A recent example concerns planning application for the temporary car park on Southgate. Planning documentation states that there are a small number of blue badge parking bays, but there are no plans to add the site to the access bus route. And when I asked why, the question was brushed aside with a comment that people only had to cross the ring road. Oh, if only they could, Mr. Mayor. This was despite the routine statement in the documents that this council has a duty to consider equality issues, including disability, as part of the planning process. On a larger scale, I refer to Huddersfield Town Centre and, in particular, the ongoing pedestrianisation project. COVID has been cited as a reason to accelerate the displacement of cars from the town centre in order to spur an increase in walking and cycling. This policy of itself ignores disabled people, many of whom are unable to walk or cycle, and it can only actually increase social inequality. With cars prohibited from an increasing proportion of the town centre, people with severe mobility impairments are effectively debarred from visiting many town centre premises. Bus gates started the rot, pedestrianisation is completing the job, and now COVID is being used to excuse it. We should not be ignoring the needs of disabled people. In fact, if we are to reduce important disability inequalities, we need very literally, and I do not apologise for the slogan, to build back better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that. We've got about over 17 people to speak, so we've closed the list now. Next person, Councillor Musarraf Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Armour, you are quite right in the sense that we need to home in on disability, particularly in prevention and interventions more upstream, because in our most deprived areas, the healthy life expectancy for women is 52 years of age. This being the age someone can expect to live without one or more major illness or disability. This means that people will be spending a third of their working life living with poor health and disabilities. And left unchecked, it will cost the taxpayer, it will cost the economy and negatively impact on the quality of life of individuals and their families. Now, I want to bust a few myths as to what tackling inequalities actually means. It means we respond to needs. It doesn't mean exclusion, but inclusion. It means reviewing internal policy procedures, asking who we are serving, who is excluded, how can we ensure fair access, and what is it that we need to do to address these disparities. Now, the Health Checks programme provides a really good example of unequal access to a service that could impact on individuals' life expectancy. Universal services perpetuate existing inequalities unless we make an asserted effort to engage and co-produce with communities who need the services the most. The roots of socioeconomic inequalities lie deep within our communities, and general practice rooted in communities is key to addressing the problem. General practices in Kirklees have organised themselves into primary care networks, making more meaningful progress towards reducing health inequalities in partnership with the council and the voluntary sector. However, they are working in the context of a biased funding formula that perpetuates the problem. Funding for GP practices is based on a formula which systematically underfunds practices in areas with the most need and highest levels of deprivation. This disparity in funding is an example of structural bias within healthcare, and we've got a huge challenge on our hands in our attempts to mitigate against these injustices. The health and social care sector needs a commitment from central government to effectively tackle inequalities with fair funding and a reversal of cuts to the public health budget. However, disparities aren't just about deprivation levels and socioeconomics. I was shocked to find out from research by the British Medical Association that 95% of doctors who died from COVID were BME, despite BME doctors only making up 44% of the whole workforce of doctors. This indicates a huge disparity regardless of socio-economic status. Now, the Public Health Review into disparities in the risk and outcomes of COVID-19 confirms that the impact of COVID-19 has replicated existing health inequalities and exacerbated them further for Black and minority ethnic people who are more likely to die from COVID, even when adjusting figures for age, deprivation and geography. This report has opened up a long overdue discussions in relation to structural racism and highlighted how being Black in the UK constitutes a public health risk. Racism creates an infrastructure that informs decisions, policies, opportunities, and economic advantages within societies. If we deliberately include the voices of others, then through that diversity and inclusivity, we create more equitable and sustainable public health programs which are owned by the communities and not just by providers. Now, this does not mean we cease focus and commitment on tackling,
30 seconds.
Okay, on tackling other forms of discrimination. It means adding an additional layer of focus on acknowledging that racism exists and has a detrimental impact on Black people, and us all committing to being part of the solution. Otherwise, you are the problem.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this report, but like a curate's egg, it is good only in parts. And I would hope everyone in this virtual chamber, became involved in public service because I wanted to tackle inequalities, and it's an issue I feel very passionately about. For me, it is important that we do not allow bias to affect the way we address this. It must be data-led, based on intelligence, and not reactive to current fashions or those who shout loudest. If we get this wrong and do not tackle inequalities equally, then we create the space for the far left and the far right, the English Defence League and the Black Lives Matter activists, who both focus on differences to divide us and push their fascist agendas. It was almost 60 years ago that one of the most powerful and seminal speeches of the last century was made. I don't need to name the speaker, as I'm sure you'll all recognise the words. They said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. Those words resonated with me, and they still do today. And if there's one thing which we can all come together around, it is in delivering that dream Martin Luther King spoke so passionately about. When we talk about ensuring that we do not judge based on the colour of one's skin, we must include everybody. Herein lies my problem with this report, and one which I've raised with the Chief Executive and the leader on a number of occasions as we've discussed these proposals through the summer, and have also raised at corporate scrutiny. There is a plethora of reports from Westminster Hall debates, Education Select Committee meetings, and the recent Ethnic Pay Gap report, as well as reports in the media, including in both The Guardian and the Daily Mail, papers from very different viewpoints, shall we say. All have demonstrated that the group which has the worst education-related inequalities are white working class males. And they were defined in those reports as those on free school meals. They show that this group has the worst educational outcomes, and if we are tackling inequalities, this group should be amongst those that we focus on and help. And yet this report brings forward a proposal to tackle education-related inequalities, which specifically excludes them from the support they need, purely based on the colour of their skin. The Race Relations Act of 1965, subsequently updated, guaranteed under the law that people could not be discriminated against based on their race, which includes in its definition colour as a characteristic of race. It is a fundamental of a fair society that all people are viewed as equal under the law as they are under God. We should not countenance any suggestion to treat people less favourably because of their skin colour. Can you imagine the reaction if this council was proposing to commission a project in which it excluded black people from just because of the colour of their skin? This takes you back to the bad old days of the 50s and 60s when black people were openly discriminated against. Thankfully, no one is proposing that, but instead the mirror image of it. Therefore, I do question how this council can be proposing a project, the objectives of which I do support, but doing so in an overtly racist way by excluding white working class youths. The intended outcome of this project states is that young people of Kirklees feel they have power equality. I'm not sure how that outcome could ever be achieved when the starting point is you will exclude from accessing help and support the very group which is recognised nationally as one which experiences the most education-related inequalities. As I've said, I've raised my reservations and yet nothing has been done. And I note the paper does not mention compliance with the latest Equality Acts of 2010 in the implications of the council. I wonder if perhaps it would be better to pause the decision until the consequences of taking actions which are deemed illegal under the Act are considered by the legal team.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity to contribution. Just before I go into my speech, can I just correct one comment that Councillor Taylor has just made? I've read the same reports that he has. The most disadvantaged group in the country is actually Gypsies, Travellers and Roma as regards educational outcome. And I think we just need to bear that in mind. Yes, boys from a deprived white British background are significantly affected, but so are other boys as well. So we just need to correct that statement. We need to be very careful when we talk about an evidence-based approach. We need to look at evidence holistically and not just picking the facts that suit our own political agenda. I agree with Councillor Taylor that most of us come into politics because we want the world to be a better place. And hopefully most of us know either emotionally or from an evidence point of view that actually a better world for it is a world that is more equitable. People in more equitable society, everybody benefits in a society like that. We as Liberal Democrats welcome any initiative that genuinely improves outcomes for everybody. and the current COVID crisis has highlighted some structural inequalities in our society that need addressing. Just comment anybody who's not read it already, the report from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which is about how coronavirus has affected inequalities in human rights. There's some really good evidence-based work there. And obviously it's part of an ongoing project. I mean, one of the things that the Equality and Human Rights Commission suggests is that they did not want to repeat work that had already been done and not to reinvent the wheel. We need to be very careful about finding quick fix solutions when it comes to equalities. Some of the solutions that we need are generational. Some of the inequalities we're talking about were apparent 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 40 years ago. And if we're not careful, we're going to ingrain repeated inequality if we do tackle equalities in the most appropriate way possible. I think from our point of view as a group, the naming of the group, actually we would have wanted something more positive in terms of showing that, setting the vision, the direction we wanted to go in. And again, let's look at what we're doing. So something that's more positive, and we can see examples about what we've done in the past. If we talk about positive, well, when we looked at, the previous government asked us to look at troubled families. What we chose to do was talk about stronger families, because that's what we wanted to achieve. We could talk about positive life opportunities or positive pathways. Previously, this council, when we brought together our economic development strategy and the health and wellbeing strategy, talked about the ladder of opportunity. And everybody ought to be able to get onto the ladder of opportunity and ought to be able to progress wherever they are on that ladder. I hopefully credit our chief executive, Jackie Gedman, with that term. She's the first person I heard use it. We need a positive direction of travel. We shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. This council was a leading national council in terms of neighbourhood renewal, and which was led when the Liberal Democrats were in administration. That's when we started looking at the areas. I mean, one of our concerns about this, and again, Shabir, you talk about this needs to be a whole council thing. You want everybody on board. Then it would have been great if you'd engaged with the whole council beforehand, and that we'd had a chance to look at the areas of inquiry before this became a public item rather than it be the first issue. And it would have been great to have actually engaged with officers on this and find it. The areas that we should be looking at, which are ingrained in me: health, education, employment, environment, safety. Those are the 5 indices of multiple deprivation that are still used to assess the situation. And looking at communities in terms of super output areas, getting smaller than that. I know Councillor Patrick and I, when we were looking at inequalities in rural areas, deprivation in rural areas, recognises there are pockets of deprivation across the whole of the borough, and we need to be able to, something that works along those lines of Kirklees are really important, because equalities work needs to benefit everybody. So we need to be, so we support the establishment of the commission. We need to be careful about the terms of reference, the areas of inquiry. We support this because we believe that a more equitable society works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tackling inequalities is a noble aspiration and one which I'm sure we can all endorse. I feel proud to live in this country. I lived here all of my life, but I've been fortunate to visit many other countries. I also take a keen interest in current affairs throughout the world. And I have to say that I believe our country is one of the most tolerant and welcoming places there is. Aside from the fact that I believe the vast majority of people in this country do not judge people on their race, sex, sexuality or other identifying feature, there is a plethora of laws in the country to prevent people from being discriminated against based on their race, sex, sexual orientation, etc. So I do have concerns. When we're discussing inequalities, it's very easy to become too political, and in so doing you miss the opportunity to address the real reasons inequalities exist. So let me pick out a few of the statements within the report. Kirklees is a diverse place, and its people should be able to freely define themselves by characteristics that are important to them, rather than the labels others impose upon them. Yes, it is, and yes, they should. But I would argue they already can, and this report is doing exactly what it purports to combat, putting labels on people affecting how they are able to live their lives. By telling people they are victims and they are denied opportunities that others are afforded, this is divisive and it creates tensions where none exist. We have seen throughout this summer the violent protests which has further divided communities. The language of division by extremists on both sides just perpetuates more extremism. So it is incumbent upon us all to think carefully about what we say and what we do, and not giving opportunity to those with extreme views from either side of the political spectrum to further their own bigotry. Local and national evidence clearly demonstrates the various structural and societal inequalities that exist in many communities and populations. Clearly there are inequalities. There are health inequalities, economic inequalities, educational inequalities, employment inequalities, to name some. However, we need to be extremely careful when discussing tackling these inequalities. We don't set out with a predetermined political objective and look for the narrative that fits that agenda. It goes on to point out that those living with lower socio-economic status and class are less likely to attain positive educational outcomes. Here I would say we all agree. But then it goes off topic and talks about COVID and how this has bluntly exposed these pre-existing inequalities, broadly grouping together older people, males, those living in deprived areas, those from BAME backgrounds. This is a pretty good big group of people. If we're saying that all males, all older people, all BAME people, and all those living in deprived areas, they're all put in the same boxes. This is where I have concerns. This is not looking at the reasons behind inequality. It's using statistics in the worst way possible. They're suggesting that all men, all black people, etc., can be categorised as one entity. Clearly they cannot. One of the current buzzwords seems to be white privilege, which seems to me a pretty ridiculous suggestion that just because you happen to be born with a particular skin colour, your life chances are determined from that point by nothing other than the colour of your skin. How are we supposed to believe that a baby born today with white skin is at an inherently advantageous position when compared with a baby born with brown or black skin, if they are both living in the same socio-economic circumstances, attending the same schools, probably mixing with the same friends? If so, I'm afraid I don't believe it. Are we also saying that a baby born to a professional couple with black skin, who have a child in an affluent area, who has better life chances than a baby born to a white mother with a drug and alcohol problem, whose father is in prison? Again, I can't believe this either. Casting my mind back to my own childhood, I remember giving some football boots I'd grown out of to a friend at school.
Councillor Smith, 30 seconds.
His own had holes in them in a similar way to his brother's school shoes. He had the same skin colour as me. I think his parents probably had a similar income level to my parents, but they chose to buy cigarettes and alcohol before kids' schools and football boots. Do I think that my friend had similar life chances to me? Well, I was fortunate enough to have parents who sacrificed some of their own luxuries in life in order that me and my sister could have a better start. No, I don't think this, but this illustrates my point.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Time's over. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Amanda Pinnick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Black Lives Matter. Saying Black Lives Matter does not mean by default other lives do not matter or people with other characteristics. On the contrary, Black Lives Matter just as much as other lives. But sadly, this has not been recognised by so many institutes in society. Some misguided people believe that discrimination, which was recently highlighted in the USA following the brutal murder of George Floyd, is an isolated phenomenon affecting only African Americans. This could not be more further from the truth. Although overt discrimination is more prevalent in the USA, hidden covert practices exist here in the UK. It is no secret that health inequalities disproportionately affect my community. Poverty disproportionately affects my community. Deprivation and inadequate housing disproportionately affects my community. Limited educational attainment and high exclusion rates disproportionately affects my community. Employment opportunities and advancement disproportionately affects my community. And let's not forget how COVID-19 and the number of deaths throughout the UK have disproportionately affected communities like mine. How can we say all lives matter if these lives are overlooked? How can we say all lives matter knowing that others are treated differently? And how can we say all lives matter if we as councillors do not use our power and influence to help improve the lives of others? Mr. Mayor, I welcome the initiatives put forward by the council this evening. Firstly, in relation to the cross-party member-led Inequalities Commission. I am pleased to hear that the structure will incorporate a combination of a top-down approach as well as a bottom-up place-based approach. There are individuals, groups and community leaders who understand the key issues and the areas to be targeted in the community. It is crucial that they help to shape, influence policy and influence service delivery for the future. The Inequalities Commission is a fantastic start to identify the flaws within the council and other institutes and social structures, and to create a robust action plan to level up the playing field. More crucially, it is vital the outcome of this piece of work has long-lasting, far-reaching implications to benefit all lives in the long run. I am fully supportive of the 3 additional priority actions in relation to health, Kirklees Council as an inclusive employer, and the leadership programme targeting Black young adults and other BAME groups. These initiatives are music to my ears. Even more opportunities to address inadequacies and inequities in our borough. And it is for this reason, Mr. Mayor, that I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Alec Lukage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whatever issues there may be with the 3 priority actions, I understand from page 144 that these were a cabinet decision, and in this item we're not being asked to endorse these, only to note the report and endorse the establishment of the Inequalities Commission, which I'm happy to do. The summary of consultation at informal corporate scrutiny highlights the need for clear definitions in the key terms. I fully agree with this. For example, we should separately define and consider absolute poverty, which measures against basic needs, and relative poverty, which measures income disparity. There are also 2 very distinct forms of equality: equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. I think that the Commission should focus on improving both and certainly not compromise one in favour of the other. Unfortunately, we too often witness the single-minded pursuit of equality of outcome, and we definitely see signs of that in this report. Prioritising equality of outcome commonly leads to significant inequality of opportunity towards various demographic groups and resentment towards authority figures in return from those groups. What my constituents want to see is greater opportunities that all residents can play a part in that helps them to help each other and improve our shared prosperity. Personally, I would relish the opportunity to be part of the Commission if that was forthcoming, and I hope this will be. Unfortunately, as the only member of the Council not in a political group, I've not been represented in any consultation prior to this meeting. Being overlooked when it comes to cross-party initiatives at the Council is an unjustifiable detriment to representation for my constituents. The Commission will encounter evidence of various factors that drive inequalities, and members need to be prepared to discuss these factors openly, however uncomfortable they may be, and regardless of whether they're institutional, cultural, or environmental. I hope that the Commission will do so, and that the work enables us to tackle the barriers that harm and hold back disadvantaged people across Kirklees. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we have Councillor Andrew Cooper, please? Andrew Cooper, unmute your mic.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, thanks for the production of the report, and I will be supporting the report. I've heard some of the Conservative members talking about how they're in favour of equality and things, and I think that's obviously commendable. I mean, when we look at inequality in the UK, it's rising, and that is a real concern. Child poverty has gone up from 27 to 32% in just a few years. We've had the rise of food banks over 10 years. We've had food banks rise to over 2,000 food banks, going from practically nothing to 1.5 million meals being handed out each year. We've seen COVID and looked at the impact of COVID, particularly on BAME communities. Now, there is nothing genetically different about BAME people, but the impact on BAME people of COVID is because of their social class. It's because of incomes. It's because of the jobs that they do. It's because of a number of those things. And so you look at that and you think, well, surely there is a relationship here. Surely there is a problem to answer. So when I hear Conservatives telling me how concerned they are about inequality, I look at it and think, well, actually, you're responsible for a heck of a lot of inequality. And I see Conservatives opening food banks and smiling proudly. And I think, don't you recognise the relationship between the policies that your government has been pushing and the impact on the people around there? So, yeah, Conservatives, tell us how interested you are in inequality. Now, I've heard Councillor Taylor, of course, and I've heard Councillor Taylor a number of occasions talking about the impact on white working class males in particular of this. And he said that, we're in danger of falling into a trap here with regard to the far right. I hear where he's coming from. But it's almost by making the very argument that you're making that you're falling into the trap of the far right, and that you're falling into the All Lives Matter camp, or even worse, the White Lives Matter camp, and not recognising the impact.
Can I just, Councillor Cooper? Can I just stop you there? Can I just ask members not to send messages because it disturbs the person who's speaking? So can you all please behave yourselves and not send these messages? I think we've sent so many messages out that don't send these messages, and you're still doing it. So if anybody does it again, it'll be told off. So please don't do it again. Carry on, Councillor Cooper. We'll give you extra time.
It's okay. I wasn't reading. So I think when you actually look at the report, and as I say, I've heard what Councillor Taylor has said, it refers to potential areas for a deep dive focus are included in the proposed model, and that includes socio-economic status and/or class. And so if you're actually involved in this commission, then issues about the white working class, issues about males who are white working class, issues about how their educational attainment is affected is something that you can do by participating in this commission. And so I hear what's being said, but I think actually if you're involved, it will be what you make it. And so, yes, I'll be supporting the report.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fully in agreement with much of the report. There's just certain biases in there that don't seem to make sense. So when you talk about just BAME really, and then you look at the statistics and evidence base, as somebody rightly said earlier, don't match. Because if you look in the Kirklees statistics as far as communities are concerned, then the Indian community, as far as GCSEs and A levels, are far greater than white male and white female. So are you taking them out of the BAME? And then you look at Bangladeshi, Black African and Indian, who are twice as likely to get better English results as far as the education process. So are you taking them out of the BAME? And then you look at Chinese that are their income is likely to be 30% higher than any other community within the borough. So do you not class Chinese as part of the Asian community? So I think it would be better if it was represented without any of the virtue signalling banners, such as BAME, and it concentrated on the real people in the real areas that have real challenges that we can impact in a positive way, rather than just giving everybody or some people a label, because I just think that labels then become divisive, prejudiced and racist. So I would prefer it if the report was more generic, rather than waving the usual banner that we hear over the last year or so. I think also when we look at the specific items such as unconscious bias training, then we are really getting into an Orwellian strategy, you know, where you're trying to retrain people's subconscious into what you believe could be racism subconsciously. I just think that we are treading on very dangerous ground. I don't think there's anybody in council that's qualified or would be able to quantify the results of that. And I think it is a very, very dangerous game to play. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Smith.
I don't believe I've asked to speak, Chair. Sorry.
Sorry, that might be me.
Councillor Michael Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep this short because I know time's running short and there's a few people still want to speak. Yeah, let's have a work through. Let's have a look at inequalities and let's see whether we can come up with some action points. Let's investigate that. A couple of points that come from the discussion tonight, and this is a point, my first point is one that I've made a number of times. I don't understand why we keep talking about communities, different communities, this community, that community. Are we not just one community? Whether we be in the community of people but in Kirklees, why do we not just refer to ourselves as the community in Kirklees? That of itself seems to be divisive to me. I've heard the speeches from Councillor Taylor, Councillor Smith and Councillor Lukic, and I would say that there's a lot in there that I would agree with and I would support, particularly some of the comments Councillor Lukic made about how we look at inequality and so forth. Are we talking about opportunities, outcomes and so forth? I think it's important that in looking at anything like this, we are sincere. And I've got a concern about sincerity. I'm going to go to page 141, and this is the three sort of immediate priority actions. And I'm going to look at the third, where we've got the Breaking Barriers project again. Here we have this text. It is identically the same text that I looked at earlier on when I said I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how it was going to deliver those outcomes in relation to the best start for children. And again, I throw down the gauntlet. Could somebody please explain to me, in terms of the outcomes that were intended here, which are that young people of Kirklees, that's the whole of Kirklees, all the young people, I take that, to feel that they have power equality. And we're going to measure that by just doing a survey of year 9 across the piece, and we're going to look at the number of civic appointment applications. Again, I do not understand what that means, and I certainly do not understand how a project that involves black young people in social action and opportunities to explore issues of heritage and identity in Black History Month, i.e. the month that we're in at the moment that's only got another 10 days to run, how that is going to deliver those outcomes. It just doesn't seem to stack up to me. And I am concerned that what we're getting here is effectively cut and pasting of this wording that's just been dropped into various different reports without any sincerity and any real thought as to what it means.
Thank you. Councillor Darren O'Donovan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gosh, I can't believe my ears, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure where to start, really. I think quite happy to support Councillor Armour in his defence of people with disabilities. Yet I won't be lectured by Conservative politicians who represent the bedroom tax, universal credit, divisive PIP assessments on disabled people, and just this evening a Conservative government that just voted against providing free school meals to children over the holidays. I find it quite a contradiction from Councillor Taylor to quite rightly, on one hand, quote Martin Luther King, Dr. King, and his I Have a Dream speech about children being treated the same no matter what the colour of their skin is, yet fails to see the message within this report which seeks to do exactly that. This report seeks exactly to achieve what Dr. King all those years ago wanted to do and people still want to do, yet Conservative members seem to not understand where we're heading with this. I think we've seen this a number of times through different reports. Quite an interesting way of commending certain parts of the report that are quite easy to commend, and then constantly undermining the report that we're listening to. And I think the public probably see right through that technique of commending parts of the report and then loudly shouting against it. I fully support this this motion and this report, Mr. Mayor. Fully support the establishment of this commission. In our ward, Mr. Mayor, as you will know, and our colleague Councillor Pervez will know, we have above regional and national average for the number of people on universal credit, those on income support, those on universal credit, those on ESA, and older people on pension credit. So any commission, any piece of work that is designed to try and tackle some of that wide-ranging equality has my full support. It's been mentioned earlier that obviously much of this is down to...
Councillor Donovan, can you just hold on 1 minute? Councillor, but we've said to you, we don't want any messages sending through. And can you please not send any more messages like that? Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I fully support this. We have particular levels of inequality and deprivation in our ward. For some of the reasons that I've mentioned, cuts to national benefits, cuts to welfare, far-right racism in certain areas that undermines the positive work that we try to do as a council. And I think if we're going to tackle inequality, this is one report that we should all, every single member in this chamber, if they are dedicated, as they say, to tackling inequality, every single member in this chamber should be absolutely supportive of this report, not seek to undermine it. They should be right behind it and quite willing to engage in the process and engage in the commission to tackle inequality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Councillor John Lawson. Just unmute, please. Councillor John Lawson.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Muted myself by accident there. Never mind. So I'll begin by thanking officers again. They've done a lot of work in very difficult times in bringing these kinds of things together. Fully supportive of the work proposed, of course. COVID did reveal a complex mosaic of overlaying of inequalities. I've said that before, and it's something I thoroughly believe. On page 134, one of our officers puts it quite nicely by saying recent events such as COVID-19 have bluntly exposed these pre-existing inequalities. I would say, well done indeed, that officer needs to be writing more reports, I think. Fully support what Councillor Marchington has been talking about. It's you put it in a very rational and compassionate way, just how I think this piece of work should play out. The approach of the lifetime lens is a really helpful touchstone, so we can stay inclusive and examine everyone's experiences. And I'd hope that those discussions would turn up some unexpected results that maybe we're not expecting, something that's been hidden and that we hadn't considered up to this point. Now, I know that that illustration is just that in the report, that kind of the life course lens. There was one spot that I did spot though, and I'll point this out to Councillor Armour as well, was that in housing it only talks about disabled and housing. I'd like to see that part of a much more ambitious housing discussion about inequality in housing. Whether that's the quality of housing and our own role in providing good quality, environmentally sound social housing for rent. I think that's an area that's missing. There'll be lots of areas missing, I know that, but that's one that I'd particularly like to see discussed. Work, of course, is in its nascent stage. Look forward to getting involved with my group, but I would look for another name I think somebody's mentioned that before. I would look for another name. Oh, it was Councillor Marchington. We've got a lot more positive choices than the Inequalities Commission, especially if we're trying to reach positive outcomes. We should be looking at things like we could perhaps lift the life course label or something like that, or maybe lift something for the Democracy Commission when we talk about voices. Previous speaker, Councillor O'Donovan, made an excellent point about the Conservative Party who have come to this chamber today to talk about inequality. I suggest that they go back to their MPs and they have a long, hard reflection on what they mean by inequality after the way that their MPs have voted in Parliament tonight. Depriving people children who are going to suffer from hot meals during the holidays, during this period especially, where we've got places in tier 3 restrictions, depriving that chance of hot meals to those children is outrageous. There's no other word for it. It's outrageous. So I would task the Conservative group who have come here today and talked about inequality to go and talk to their own party about inequality and what they actually mean by it, because I'd be interested in hearing those results. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. It's 8:30 and we've got another 9 speakers and then obviously on top of that we'll be voting. So this just urge speakers to be a bit mindful that we've not got a lot of time. So can we have Councillor Steve Hall, please?
David Hall.
David Hall, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Lawson. I will bear that in mind. Tackling inequalities. My group has consistently supported the administration's intent to tackle inequalities in the borough, inequalities in life chances, life expectancy, general health, well-being, access to services. Tackling inequalities is a good thing to do. We all feel that. We want people to feel safer and healthier. We want people to be better educated and to be more affluent and to experience fewer barriers in life, and that's what we're here to achieve. And therefore, we will continue to support the general drive to reduce inequalities. We'll continue to support what we think are the right steps to achieve these aims. And some of what we have in this paper are sensible first steps, but there are parts that we cannot support. And these are legitimately held views, and Councillor John Taylor has spoken with some passion about why he believes this. Councillor Watson also explained clearly in this debate and the last debate why we can't support a particular approach. Incidentally, to add to Councillor Marchington's comments earlier, the largest proportion of children excluded from schools is not defined by any racial characteristic. 23% of excluded children are autistic. I fear we are proposing solutions to problems before we have ascertained the facts. And the scope for meaningful action to address the real issues of education-related inequalities is being narrowed. And this hasn't been well thought out at all. And I fear it's a reactionary way of proceeding, rather than a measured way, which collates the evidence and then decides what the problems are and how best to tackle them. It's the wrong approach to the subject.
Can I just,
in all conscience, support it?
Councillor Hall, can I just who was it?
So Councillor Marchington.
Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, thanks, David. Just to say, I was referring to educational outcomes, not exclusions at that point. When I was referring to the most disadvantaged group was gypsies, travellers and roamers. That's to do with educational outcomes, not exclusions.
Yep, I welcome that clarification. Thank you very much, Captain Marchington. The gypsies and travellers statistics also apply to exclusions as well. I think I should make some comments regarding the tone of this debate, and I think it's very unfortunate that some members of the council would rather have a go, make insulting comments about others, instead of acknowledging what are sincerely held beliefs. We don't all believe the same things, and that's probably why we're members of different political parties. But it seems that some members even refuse to accept that others even have a differing point of view. So if we're going to succeed in this, for goodness sake, let's put the narrow politics aside, not be lecturing one another, and be prepared to work with others who hold different views. It's the only way we're going to get through this. And if we're going to fall out like this over issues of such importance, we're really not going to get anywhere. Our position is we have grave concerns about the direction of approach in this particular report, and it means we can't support it. Nevertheless, we will continue to support the establishment of the Commission and to support its broad aims, and we will play a constructive part in that process, and I know others will too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have Councillor Elizabeth Smage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are brief and is more on process really, and is related to what I discussed at Cabinet yesterday. I've been discussing for a long time addressing health inequalities. I can remember the publication of the Marmot Review in 2010, and my comments are on health inequalities. There has since been an update of the Marmot Review, which was earlier this year, unfortunately before March, and no doubt health inequalities and factors that affect them will have widened. I would suggest that evidence such as the Marmot Review is taken into account. It is more than health that affects health inequalities. As I said in Cabinet yesterday, the report discusses partnership working, which is what is needed if aims are to be achieved. However, the report does not reflect the role of the Health and Wellbeing Board has in monitoring and championing work on health inequalities. This is a partnership board with cross-party member representation. The Health and Wellbeing Board has had on its agenda recently consideration of emerging evidence of worse outcomes from COVID-19 for vulnerable groups and a renewed partnership approach to tackling inequalities. I'm also surprised that a report that's going to be published tomorrow on a West Yorkshire level has not been mentioned in the debate. People need help. We need inequalities addressing across Kirklees, not duplication of process. Can I ask that process does not get in the way of positive outcomes for all our residents? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harpreet. Opal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to welcome Councillor Smage's comments there. So thank you for that. I think she makes an important point about process. I'll try and be brief as well, Mr. Mayor. Overall, I think we know that equal societies almost always do better, and that has been evidenced quite well in the book The Spirit Level, written by Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson. They highlight the pernicious effects that inequality has on societies in eroding trust, increasing anxiety and illness. I therefore welcome the establishment of the Inequalities Commission. It is really important that we do work in order to gain insight and understanding, and that is part of the process of the Inequalities Commission. A lot of us are coming at this from different perspectives. I agree with Councillor David Hall. People have different opinions, have different. They come at this from different life experiences. It's important that we take all that into account, absolutely, and that's why it's important that different parties get involved in the process. Overall, this is about people's life chances. This isn't about saying one group should get more or that one group should get less. This isn't about excluding people. We should also recognise that people are not on a level playing field to begin with, and that's exactly why we need to tackle inequalities. Colleagues have rightly pointed out that some white working class boys, those on free school meals, children in care, and gypsies and traveller communities have disproportionate educational outcomes. But it's also the case that inequalities are faced by many BAME communities. I should also point out that one BAME community does not exist. And yes, there are different outcomes for people from different ethnicities. We don't have to go far to find some of the evidence around this, and I would ask colleagues to read evidence and data as widely as possible, and I say that about myself as well. I did just want to make a point about digital exclusion. I think with COVID, we've realised just how important digital provision is. And for those that aren't able to access a laptop or broadband right now, it means that they might not be able to access appointments, education provision, work, a job interview, or access advice or make connections. And we know that in our local area, one of our local schools, when they recently did an audit of pupils, 20% of pupils weren't able to access IT currently. Our community anchors only today had a request for 19 laptops for young people in need of them. So I think, some of the points around digital provision and digital exclusion do also need to be factored in and looked into. And I do understand the council are developing a digital inclusion partnership. So, as a local ward, we're working with our partners to try and develop a laptop loaning scheme and looking at refurbishing IT equipment. So hopefully we can do some more work on that. But overall, I very much welcome this commission, and I really, really hope that we can all come together and work on this. This is about our communities. It's not about us facing off against each other, and I think we can all welcome that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Peter McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I've had real IT problems in the course of the night. I've been really impressed by the quality of the contributions, particularly by the last speaker, and also by Councillor Amanda Pinnock. But I think it's important that we establish an Equalities Commission, not as an academic exercise, but to better understand the complexities of inequality, and most importantly, explore what we can do about it. We shouldn't look at the issue in one dimension. Currently, with regard to the epidemic, age obviously is the critical variable, but the Commission will explore wider issues of inequality. Clearly, race and social class stand out in determining variations in opportunity and life chances, whether we're referring to education, income, housing, life expectancy, health, or any other socio-economic factor. The issue is, what can we do about it? We may not be able to transform society, but I would put to you to consider the experience of the wartime government. It showed how standardisation and guarantees could transform the lives of a whole generation. Government then applied common standards for health, nutrition and welfare, particularly for children. And the standard of health at that time was better than it's ever been in Britain's history. That principle could be applied again and would have maximum benefit, and the cost would not be that great. I would hope that we could take that into account. And then more widely from this consideration, and I really do welcome it. I think it's well overdue. I think we should explore all the manifestations of inequality, and I would stress what we can do about it. The interest that this subject obviously is engendered in the council tells us a great deal, and there's a great will on behalf of members of the council to do something about it and make a change. And I think it's in that spirit we should welcome what is being put before us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I start? I mean, I'm actually moving away from my speech. So I'd like to say to Councillor Hall, I am prepared to work with anybody from whatever perspective and whichever party they belong to. But like Councillor Taylor, I came into politics to represent all our communities. And I hope that the residents across Kirklees believe that they are being served in that manner. However, there are points that lots of points that I agree with all my Labour colleagues, but some I would like to pick up. So, for example, Councillor Taylor was saying he doesn't see the colour of my skin, but if he doesn't see the colour of my skin, skin, he doesn't see me. And, you know, sometimes we hide behind facts and evidence. The justice system used to operate like that until they realized it does not serve us well. And they too have gone back and decided to re-look and acknowledge the color of people's skin.
Councillor Mather, can we have there's a point of order. Councillor Taylor?
I never said anything about not recognising anybody's colour of skin. I think you need to re-listen to what I actually said, Councillor Mather. I never said that at all. Okay, so I'd ask you to withdraw that comment, please.
Okay, that's fine.
Councillor Taylor, if you didn't, what I am saying, it still holds that you have to acknowledge people. You have to also recognise that people have to be heard, and there is nothing wrong with looking at this report. It's a fantastic report. I support it wholeheartedly. A cross-party approach will enable us to have the discussions. It is a starting point and not the end game. So, for example, when I talk about the climate change, I always look around, and to me it feels like, where are the BAME underrepresented groups? It appears to me that it's only the middle classes that care about climate change. I know that's not the case, so I go and look and make sure that our approach is inclusive. We need to be able to do this. We need to make sure that we're not falling behind, that we're on the right side of history, that we need to look at this issue. And colour of skin is very, very important. And somebody, I think Councillor Smith was saying, about tolerance and all the rest. We need to hear the very many voices. We need to acknowledge what minorities have to say, rather than there's, it's all hunky-dory here. I mean, I am coming from a place where I made a decision to marry a white Geordie. I know what's that like. I have brought up families. My children are of dual heritage. I need to be honest with them. Whilst I am willing to listen to them, their reality, their perspectives are likely to be different. What they will they will experience is not necessarily going to be my experience, but that doesn't make their experience any less valid. So and talking about, when we talk about BAME, we're not talking about, it's not a homogenous group. Yes, you will have the high attainers and the not so high attainers. My route to all of this, sitting by your sides, is through education. I was told I was going to be married at 18. Why bother? Well, I did bother, and I did bother to an extent where I've spent a lifetime of serving people, and I think this is the right way to go. And I hope all my colleagues in this virtual chamber will support this report. It's not the end, it's the beginning. Let's go on this journey together. And can I say a big thank you to all our officers for putting it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Yusra Hussain. On mute, please.
Hi.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report. I agree with the points made by Councillor Pinnock, Cooper, O'Donovan, Lawson. I could go on, Opal, McBride, and the excellent points that they've made. I guess for those members who know me, know I've served as a public servant in the NHS in this pandemic, and having worked frontline, I do notice the cycle that leads to inequalities in specific populations. In regards to COVID-19, COVID-19 affects everyone. We all acknowledge that, that's everyone. But the evidence shows that it has affected BAME people quite disproportionately. Local and national evidence clearly demonstrates that various structural and social inequalities exist in many communities. Recently, COVID-19 has bluntly exposed pre-existing inequalities. And if you look at the Public Health England report, it's found that older people, males, those living in deprived areas, those from Black, Asian and minority ethnicities are increased risk of poorer outcomes. Now, intensive care unit admissions rates are high, death rates are high amongst males, that's males in general. People from different BAME groups are likely to die of COVID-19. People that work jobs, and I say, I'm stressing this point, people across the board in any community, whether working a security job, healthcare setting, retail, hospitality, transport, social care, are more likely to die of COVID-19. Those in deprived areas are twice more likely to die of COVID-19 once they're diagnosed. The mortality rate is higher of people born outside the UK as well. And age is one of the strongest predictors of poorer outcomes for COVID-19. And further to this, 2 to 3 times more deaths in care homes that are expected. And that's the Public Health England report. It's essential to highlight that inequalities are also experienced and exacerbated in how people are treated. Assumptions that we make, the way we communicate our language and how we use that language, how services are designed and accessed. And I think it's important because I've just experienced that in this chamber. And its important aspect is that it is something that cannot always be seen, but it's also felt. So the evidence is there, and it's about us and how we move forward as cross-group, work together, because I think it would be dangerous that if you completely ignore the evidence and the inequalities that are existing and have been exacerbated and shown due to this COVID-19. Rather, we should work together and acknowledge the inequalities and use our powers to ensure we understand and practice the true meaning of equality. We are here to represent everyone in our wards, and that means everyone. I'm going to stress the point again, everyone in our wards. But we have to recognise the evidence-based sort of journals and articles and the research that's done out there that clearly show there is an inequality that exists across communities, and they have to be addressed. So I do hope we can all come together, cross-working party, come together and fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Graham Turner.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's been an interesting debate. I think we all know where we all stand and all our opinions on this issue now, on this report. We started off this evening by Councillor Taylor referring to August 1963, when Martin Luther King said he had a dream. Just bear that in mind. Just think about that. That's 57 years ago. I was 4.5 when Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, and we're still talking about it. We're still talking about it. We've made very little progress. And if I sound passionate, I am, because, as I say, 57 years and we're still talking about it. Well, I'll tell you, I have a dream. I have a dream that my grandson will not be here in 57 years still discussing this issue. It's time we tackled it as a nation, as a world, everybody. It's time to call an end to this. We talked about why we came into public service. I can tell you why my political views were formed. I was 14 years old. I listened to a minister who was in Rhodesia, who talked about the abuse, the state hounded him because he believed in equality for the black population, the majority population. And what he went through, he had to be smuggled out of the country. That formed my basis for my political views. And that sticks with me forever. 14 years old, I still remember it. It's time we tackle this head on, and we shouldn't be talking about this in another 57. So my dream is my grandson does not have to discuss this. That's my dream.
Thank you. Councillor Shabir Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A very interesting debate, and once again, thanks for all the members. Despite opinions might be different, I think it's good to actually have these debates in council. But the thing that really gets me, and I think Graham stole my thunder, and no disrespect, David, but we've been talking about this since 1963, probably longer, probably a lot longer in terms of the issue we actually face in hand. Let me tell you a little story. I've got relations, I've got aunties and uncles that live in South Africa. And when I was a little lad, they used to come to visit us on a regular basis. And this is when apartheid was in the system in South Africa. And my dad used to say to him that, because my heritage is Indian, and the Indians in South Africa were really well off, because what they did was they could be the middlemen and women, and they would get all the goods and services from the whites, and then they would sell them at twice the price, probably more, to the blacks, because of apartheid, they wouldn't do business with them. And my dad used to say to my aunts and uncles, his cousins, that a day will come when you will have to run from South Africa, because when a community is suppressed, it's only suppressed for so much. And bearing in mind that the country was belonging to the blacks. Anyway, what happened was when Nelson Mandela, after all the years when he came out of prison, he came into power. So lo and behold, all my relations, all my uncles and aunties came to England, and they're stashing the money in the bank. And my dad told them, I told you what happened. And my dad said that, this is what injustice and this is what segregation gives you. But luckily, Nelson Mandela had a bigger heart and had a bigger vision, and he didn't let chaos come into that country. Look, the bottom line is, is this is not about Asian lives. This is not about Indian lives or Pakistani lives or any other lives. We know that the statistics show themselves, and I acknowledge the point, John, what you're making, and you're completely right. White kids are less likely to go to university as opposed to black kids. But when you drill down further, and statistics are all very sort of like, well, but when you drill down further, if you look at the boardroom, if you look at the top 100 FTSE companies, how many black people are there on the boards? There isn't any hardly. You might get one or two. How many top level judges there are? One or two maybe. So these are the issues we're trying to tackle. That's not to say that we're going to ignore everybody else. We just need to fine tune and focus. And I think what everybody said, right? Yeah, seriously, I've got respect for everybody who's actually said something, because it shows by having your opinion, right? Yeah, you do care for this agenda. So one of my cabinet members, I won't mention her name, she just texted me to say that let's address inequalities, but at the same time, let's bring communities together. And I think with the debate we've had today, I'm sure we can do that. So I understand what you're saying, David, right? Yeah, I hope, once again, a plea from myself to you directly, I hope we can come on board. We will address the issues, because, and again, John, you mentioned Joe Cox, there's a lot more in common that we share than divides us. So, we can, it's still early days, we can agree to disagree, but that doesn't mean to say that we don't have to be part of this commission. I'd like everybody to be on this commission. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that. We now move to the vote.
Councillor Pandor.
For.
Councillor David Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor John Lawson.
For.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Greaves.
For.
Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Armour.
Abstain.
Councillor Asif.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
Abstain.
Councillor Bolt. Councillor Bolt. Come back. Councillor Burke. Councillor Burke. No. Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Paola Davies.
For.
Councillor Paul Davies.
For.
Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Donald Firth.
Abstain.
Councillor Eric Firth.
For.
Councillor Granger Mead.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Hall.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
Abstain.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Mr. Mayor.
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain.
For.
Councillor Iredale.
For.
Councillor Kolchik.
For.
Councillor Kendrick.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Lees Hamilton. Councillor Lees Hamilton.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Abstain.
Councillor Lee Richards.
For.
Councillor Lowe.
For.
Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Lyons.
For.
Councillor Marchington.
For.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor McBride.
For.
Councillor McGuinn.
Abstain.
Councillor Munro.
Killer.
For.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
For.
Councillor O'Donovan.
For.
Councillor Patrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Pattison.
For.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Kath Pinnock. Councillor Kath Pinnock. For. Councillor Sarwar.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Smage.
Abstain.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
For.
Councillor Richard Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Sokal.
For.
Councillor John Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Ulla.
For.
Councillor Uppal.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Warner.
For.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Zaman.
For.
I'll just go back and check if Councillor Bolt is there. Or Councillor Burke.
For.
Yeah, that's carried.
That's
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. It's 1 minute past 9. So we come to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you.